Chapter 6:27. When Yi Chen heard this, he was stunned. Then he looked at the big turtle in flaming tiger Yi Lin's hand. This little bastard's size was not small at all. However, from the aura it was emitting, it should still be in its infancy stage. Could it be that this little bastard was a spiritual beast? It was no wonder that Yi Chen thought so. After all, flaming tiger Yi Lin was Yi Chen's fairy pet. It would not catch turtles for no reason. Moreover, they were by the sea. According to the habits of turtles, they would not live by the sea. Of course, after the meteor fell and the world changed, it was not impossible for turtles to change their living habit. However, this was not important. What was important was that flaming tiger Yi Lin would not catch turtles on purpose. It was impossible for flaming tiger Yi Lin to be a glutton and want to eat turtles. One must know that the object of Yen Hu and Yi Lin's gluttony was natural treasures, not meat. For flaming tiger Yi Lin, if it wanted to eat something, there were plenty of elixirs and spiritual stones in Samsara City in the real world. It was also because of Yi Chen's understanding of flaming tiger Yi Lin that he suspected the identity of the turtle at the first moment. Next to Yi Chen, flaming tiger Yi Lin, who was holding the big turtle, saw Yi Chen in a daze. She hurriedly winked at Yi Chen and then transmitted a voice message to him. "Brother, this little bastard has the blood of the black tortoise in its body." Seeing flaming tiger Yi Lin blink, Yi Chen was puzzled. After hearing the voice message from flaming tiger Yi Lin, his eyes suddenly lit up. "Holy shit! I thought this little bastard was a spiritual beast." Unexpectedly, this little bastard was not only a spiritual beast, but also a spiritual beast with the blood of the black tortoise. Thinking of this, Yi Chen could not help but raise his eyebrows. Then he looked at flaming tiger Yi Lin and said seriously, "Take it with you. Bring it back and stew it into soup. It's very nutritious." The big turtle had the black tortoise's bloodline, so it was at least a top spirit beast. However, it was still in its infancy, so the chances of it recognizing a master weren't high. Flaming tiger Yi Lin knew this, and Yi Chen knew it even more. Therefore, Yi Chen cooperated with flaming tiger Yi Lin and put on an act for the big turtle to see. To be more precise, Yi Chen had deliberately said that he would bring it back and cook it for the big turtle. Don't, I'll submit, I'll recognize you as my master, don't stew me." When the big turtle heard Yi Chen's words, it stuck its head out of its shell and shouted at Yi Chen in fear. When Yi Chen heard this, he didn't respond to the tortoise. Instead, he stared at the tortoise's head that had emerged from its shell. "Do you still have a brain?" The moment Yi Chen finished speaking, the big turtle couldn't help but be startled for a moment. Then it said, "I only have one brain, no second brain." When Yi Chen heard this, he sighed and said, "You look so strange. I thought you had two brains." The black tortoise was a combination of a tortoise and a snake. Besides the tortoise's head, it also had a snake's head. This big turtle didn't, so Yi Chen was naturally a little disappointed. Of course, despite his disappointment, Yi Chen still believed in flaming tiger Yi Lin's judgment. After all, flaming tiger Yi Lin's true body had already reached the immortal beast level. Although its cultivation realm wasn't very high, its identity as an immortal beast was real. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that flaming tiger Yi Lin was better than Yi Chen at sensing the bloodline of spirit beasts. Therefore, when Yi Chen heard the flaming tiger Yi Lin's voice transmission, he immediately cooperated with the flaming tiger Yi Lin's act. The result was obvious. This tortoise with the black tortoise's bloodline in its body submitted right away. Fortunately, the tortoise was only in its infancy. Otherwise, no matter how much Yi Chen and flaming tiger Yi Lin put on an act, it would be useless. When the tortoise in flaming tiger Yi Lin's grip heard Yi Chen's disappointed words, its eyes immediately revealed a panicked look. Then, it shouted anxiously at Yi Chen, "I'll accept you. I'll accept you as my master. Hurry up and start. I'm a spirit beast, a top-notch spirit beast. I can help you." When Yi Chen heard this, he couldn't help but be stunned. This little bastard was too cowardly. When the flaming tiger Yilin, who was holding the tortoise, saw Yi Chen in a daze, she immediately realized what Yi Chen was thinking. Then, without hesitation, she slapped the tortoise's head. After the slap, the flaming tiger Yilin said fiercely to the big tortoise, "When you fight in the future, you have to be brave and brave. If you have to fight in the future, you have to step forward bravely. Don't be a coward, understand? I'm a tortoise to begin with." When the big tortoise heard this, it immediately said aggrievedly. When the flaming tiger Yilin heard this, she was instantly enraged. Without thinking, she slapped the big tortoise again. After the slap, the flaming tiger Yilin said fiercely again, "You still dare to be so stubborn? Let me tell you, if you don't go up first when we fight in the future, I'll make soup out of you. Do you hear me?" When the big tortoise heard this, it hastily nodded and said, "I hear you, I hear you." When Yi Chen saw this, the corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Then, he looked directly at the tortoise with the Xuanwu bloodline. Then, he raised his right hand and a drop of essence blood was instantly forced out by Yi Chen. Then, it flew toward the big tortoise. When Yi Chen's essence blood reached the big tortoise's head, there was a flash of red light. Then, Yi Chen's essence blood was instantly absorbed by the big tortoise. At the same time, a mysterious connection appeared between Yi Chen and the big tortoise with the Xuanwu bloodline. When Yi Chen sensed this connection, he glanced at the big tortoise, or rather, the pseudo-Xuanwu, and said, "Cultivate well. Strive to awaken the Xuanwu bloodline in your body as soon as possible." Before the pseudo-Xuanwu was subdued, neither Yi Chen nor Yilin could speak of the Xuanwu bloodline in front of the pseudo-Xuanwu. This was because if they spoke of it in front of it, it was very likely that the Xuanwu bloodline in the pseudo-Xuanwu would resist recognizing a master. After all, the Xuanwu was a divine beast. It was simply impossible for it to recognize anyone as its master. As for its descendants, even if their bloodline was extremely thin, there would be an innate resistance to recognizing a master. Otherwise, the flaming tiger Yilin wouldn't have used sound transmission to tell Yi Chen that the pseudo-Xuanwu possessed the Xuanwu bloodline. Of course, this was before. But now, the pseudo-Xuanwu had already recognized Yi Chen as its master. There was no longer any problem with the matter of the Xuanwu bloodline. After all, after recognizing a master, the life and death of the pseudo-Xuanwu would be in Yi Chen's hands. Moreover, there was no possibility of the pseudo-Xuanwu betraying Yi Chen. After hearing Yi Chen's words, the pseudo-Xuanwu was slightly taken aback. Then, its eyes immediately revealed an expression of incomparable joy. In the next second, the pseudo-Xuanwu looked expectantly at Yi Chen and asked, "Master, I really have the Xuanwu bloodline in my body?" "That's right. So, you have to cultivate well and strive to increase the density of the Xuanwu bloodline in your body. If there is a chance in the future, I will help you advance to a true Xuanwu." Yi Chen chuckled and nodded when he heard this. When the pseudo-Xuanwu heard this, it was immediately overjoyed and hastily shouted, "Thank you, Master. I will definitely work hard to cultivate." Slap! The flaming tiger Yilin slapped the pseudo-Xuanwu again and then scolded, "Don't forget, don't fight. You have to know that you are the descendant of the Xuanwu. Your body is covered in a turtle shell and your defense is extremely high. You can't lose face for the Xuanwu. Do you understand?" When the pseudo-Xuanwu heard this, it was instantly stunned. Then, it saw the flaming tiger Yilin's gaze that looked like it wanted to eat someone. In that instant, the pseudo-Xuanwu suddenly shivered and hastily shouted, "I understand. Got it. Okay, it's time to go back. I have to return to that world as soon as possible." When Yi Chen saw the flaming tiger Yilin acting like a big sister, he shook his head helplessly and said. With that, his right hand grabbed the flaming tiger Yilin's shoulder and stepped into the distorted space. In the next second, Yi Chen, the flaming tiger Yilin, and the pseudo-Xuanwu all disappeared together. Chapter 628. In the Samsara city in the real world, the space in the hall of the Castellan's mansion suddenly distorted. In the next second, Yi Chen walked out of the distorted space with the flaming tiger Yi Lin and the tortoise with the bloodline of the divine beast Black Tortoise. The golden-haired monkey and the treasure-hunting fish Yi Xiaoyu were chatting in the hall. When they saw Yi Chen return, they hurriedly got up and bowed to Yi Chen. "Greetings, brother, master." Yi Chen nodded with a smile. He then looked at the treasure-hunting fish Yi Xiaoyu and asked, "Have the ladies returned to the game world?" "Yes, brother." The treasure-hunting fish Yi Xiaoyu hurriedly nodded when she heard Yi Chen's question. When Yi Chen heard this, he felt a sense of guilt for not being able to accompany the ladies. After sighing inwardly, Yi Chen looked at the flaming tiger Yi Lin and said, "I'm going back to the game world right away. I'll leave this place to you. In 2 days I'll send troops to the real world to guard it. You have to cultivate diligently with Xiaoyu and the others." Yi Chen asked the flaming tiger Yi Lin and the treasure-hunting fish Xiaoyu to cultivate diligently because in 2 days, the protective shield of the safe city in the real world would completely disappear. At that time, the novice period of humans would be completely over, and the whole world would enter a new chapter of blood and fire. At that time, the law of the jungle would bring about death, bloodshed, miserable howls, and sorrows. All kinds of suffering and sorrow would be completely displayed in the world. In order to avoid such a tragic ending, one must have the power to crush everything. And if one wanted to have the power to crush everything, how could one not cultivate diligently and obtain it automatically? Of course, even if the new chapter of blood and fire began, Yi Chen's Samsara city would not be affected in the early stages. After all, Yi Chen's forces were now strong enough to crush all players. Moreover, Yi Chen was the strongest among the players. He had even cleared out the special players among the shifters. Therefore, Samsara city would not be threatened immediately after the new chapter began. However, as time passed, there would be more and more powerful players in the real world, and there would be more and more high-level combat forces. Then, Yi Chen and Yi Chen's Samsara city would definitely be challenged. Even Yi Chen, who had reached the god martial arts realm after his rebirth, could not deny this point. After all, the living beings in the real world all had the identity of players, and increasing their strength was actually not too difficult for the players. As time passed, the players' understanding of the game's rules and of the game world would become clearer and more detailed. This way, the players would definitely grasp the correct way to advance quickly. Then, players with high-end combat power would appear. Yi Chen was a player who had reincarnated, so he naturally knew this. After all, in Yi Chen's previous life, the journey of players in the game world was from being confused to being ignorant, from being ignorant to understanding, and from understanding to knowing everything. Of course, this was not important. What was important was that after the protective shield of the safe city disappeared in the real world, high-level combat forces would appear. If Samsara city did not have the ability to deal with high-level combat forces, then Yi Chen would not be able to develop steadily in the game world. Then, how could Yi Chen use the memory of his rebirth to take the lead and become the strongest player? Yi Chen naturally did not want this to happen. Yi Chen wanted to be a powerful player, a player who could crush everything. Therefore, Yi Chen brought the flaming tiger Yi Lin to the real world after the game started and had her guard Samsara city in the real world. Only when there was no danger in the real world would Yi Chen be able to seize the opportunity in the game world and seize all the opportunities in the game world. Then, he would take the lead step by step and become the strongest player. This was also the main reason why Yi Chen emphasized that Yanhu Yi Lin, the treasure-hunting fish Yi Xiaoyu, the golden-haired monkey, and the pseudo-black tortoise should work hard in their cultivation. After all, their cultivation speed was faster than Yi Chen's subordinate. Only when they reached a higher level could they truly resist the attacks of the players who wanted to challenge Yi Chen's position or steal everything from Yi Chen in the future. They were the only ones who could stop the experts who wanted to challenge Yi Chen, or simply eliminate those experts. Only then would Yi Chen be able to roam the game world without any worries. Otherwise, Yi Chen would go offline every day to deal with the players who wanted to attack Yi Chen and Samsara City. How could he have the time to develop in the game world? After hearing Yi Chen's incomparably solemn words, Yan Hu and Yi Lin's expressions instantly turned solemn. After which, they heavily nodded and opened their mouths to say, "Big brother, I will definitely lead Xiaoyu and the others to cultivate hard." Hearing this, Yi Chen nodded with satisfaction. Then, with a wave of his right hand, 10 balls of light covered with runes suddenly appeared. Glancing at the 10 balls of light, Yi Chen pressed his right hand to the ground. The 10 balls of light instantly rushed to the ground and then disappeared. In the next second, with a thought from Yi Chen, 10 waves of earthquake-like fluctuations instantly rose from the ground. Then, everything returned to silence. While Yan Hu, Yi Lin, the treasure-hunting fish Yi Xiaoyu, the golden monkey, and the pseudo-black tortoise were still in a daze, 10 extremely dense spiritual energies abruptly rose from the ground and shot up into the sky. In an instant, they were pulled back by the spirit-gathering formation disc Yi Chen had set up in Samsara City. "Big brother, this is..." Flaming Tiger Yi Lin, who felt the extremely dense spiritual energy, suddenly came back to her senses. Then, she looked at Yi Chen with ecstasy and asked. Flaming Tiger Yi Lin was an immortal beast. Naturally, she liked environments with dense spiritual energy. The density of spiritual energy in Samsara City was already terrifying. Now, 10 waves of spiritual energy suddenly appeared. Whether in terms of quantity or density, they all surpassed that of the original Samsara City. How could Flaming Tiger Yi Lin not be shocked and happy? In fact, not only Flaming Tiger Yi Lin, but also Treasure Hunter Fish Yi Xiaoyu, Golden Monkey, and Black Tortoise were all very excited. Because they were Yi Chen's pets of intelligence, they were all qualified to enjoy the extremely dense spiritual energy in Samsara City. After hearing Flaming Tiger Yi Lin's surprised and inexplicable inquiry, Yi Chen smiled slightly and said, "It's a high-grade spiritual energy. Although it's only a part of the harvest from this trip, it's enough for you to use." For Yi Chen, Samsara City was his headquarters. Naturally, the higher the density of spiritual energy here, the better. After all, Yi Chen still wanted to improve the cultivation speed of his subordinates and pets of intelligence. Naturally, he wouldn't be stingy just because the high-grade spiritual energy was precious. As soon as Yi Chen finished speaking, a layer of fog suddenly appeared on the ground of Samsara City, which was originally free of fog. Then, it quickly thickened until it was about 1 meter thick before it stopped. Spiritual energy turning into fog. Flaming Tiger Yi Lin was stunned when she saw this. Then, she shouted in surprise. Treasure Hunter Fish Yi Xiaoyu, Golden Monkey, and Black Tortoise also opened their eyes wide at this moment. Spiritual energy turning into fog only happened when the density of spiritual energy reached a certain level. To Flaming Tiger Yi Lin and other pets of intelligence, it was simply a blessing to be able to cultivate in such an environment. Yi Chen glanced at Flaming Tiger Yi Lin and other pets of intelligence, who were inexplicably surprised. Then, he smiled and said, "Cultivate well." "Yes, brother, master." Flaming Tiger Yi Lin, Treasure Hunter Fish Yi Xiaoyu, Golden Monkey, and Black Tortoise all came back to their senses when they heard this and hurriedly responded. Yi Chen nodded, then walked straight to the side of the diamond-level gaming chamber and lay down in it. When the chamber door closed, Yi Chen returned to the gaming world. Chapter 629. In the game world, in Luoyang Inn, in the Sky Room, a pillar of light suddenly appeared. When the pillar of light dissipated, Yi Chen, who had returned to the game world, instantly appeared here. At this moment, a world announcement suddenly sounded. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chen for being the first person to advance to the God Martial Realm. Player Yi Chen is rewarded with 108 attribute points. Ding. Congratulations to player Yi Chun for killing all the special shifter players and completing the special hidden quest, Rise of the Humans. Player Yi Chun is rewarded with 10,000 innate attribute points and 1 lucky draw ticket. The 3 consecutive world announcements instantly caused an uproar in the originally calm world channel. F***CK. F***CK. What's going on? How did Yi Chun advance again? What the F***CK? I remember that Yi Chun advanced to the Nirvana realm not long ago, right? You didn't remember wrongly. Yi Chun advanced to the Nirvana realm only a few F***king days ago. No, it hasn't even been that long. F***CK. Isn't it harder to advance in realms? Why is it so easy for Yi Chun to advance from the Hoteon realm to the innate realm? It's not just simple. I've been in the game since the beginning, and I still haven't advanced to the innate realm. How many realms has Yi Chun advanced? Even if he cheats, he can't be so obvious. Be envious, be jealous. Let me tell you, it's useless. Boss Yi Chun is the most awesome. No matter what you think, Boss Yi Chun will crush you all. Hee, that's right. Boss Yi Chun is the most awesome existence. There's no other. F***CK, stop arguing. Are you all stupid? Didn't you see the last world announcement? Can someone tell me what's going on with the special shifter players? How did Yi Chun find them and kill them all? Didn't the invading shifter players return to the shifter realm? Is there a need to ask? It's already very obvious, alright? The invading shifters have been chased away. If Yi Chun can kill a special shifters player, he must have done it in the real world. That's the crux of the problem. F***CK. How did Yi Chun know that the shifters had special players? He even went offline and killed all of them? The most ridiculous thing is that after completing the special hidden mission, not only did I get a chance to draw a prize, I even got 10,000 innate attribute points. F***CK, if you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten about it. 10,000 innate attribute points, that's way too much. I already told you that Yi Chun cheated, but you didn't believe me. If Yi Chun didn't cheat, then my neighbor's livestream will eat shit. Mother***ker, didn't you guys pay attention to the fact that Boss Yi Chun killed a special player from the shifter race? Why bother with these idiots? If they're smart, they wouldn't be gossiping. Mother***ker, why don't you guys think about it? The world announcement even announced the special shifters players. How can they be simple? I still have to say what I have to say. Otherwise, these idiots will really think that they didn't get any benefit. F***CKU, you bastard who kneels down and licks Yi Chun. Tell me, what benefits did I get? Idiot, I didn't want to say it at first, but since you have doubts, I'll tell you clearly today. If Boss Yi Chun didn't kill the special shifters players, then 2 days later, there will only be one result for you guys who only know how to be envious and jealous. No matter if you encounter or are found by the special shifters players, there will only be one result. Death. Mother***ker, I'm a member of the Green Bull Gang. Our boss is very powerful. The special shifters players are nothing. Idiot, why don't you think about it? The world announcement specifically announced the special shifters players. How can they be normal? If they were normal, would there be so many rewards? 7-star tower, congratulations to you of Beach. Yi Chun has advanced to the God Martial realm. Kill all the special shifters players. Limitless Palace, congratulations to you of Beach. Yi Chun has advanced to the God Martial realm. Kill all the special shifters players. The world announcement was in an uproar. Yi Chun glanced at it and frowned. The players were envious and jealous of Yi Chun. It had started when the game started. Yi Chun knew this very well, so Yi Chun didn't care much about it. To Yi Chun, it didn't matter if the players were envious or jealous. Even if the players' hearts were twisted to the point of hating Yi Chun didn't care. After all, Yi Chun had already left the players in the dust. Moreover, Yi Chen was confident that he would continue to leave the players in the dust. However, Yi Chen could ignore the normal players, but he couldn't ignore the mysterious forces that had been hidden very deeply in his previous life until the Primordial Age. To be precise, the Seven-Star Tower, Limitless Palace, and other players that were congratulating Yi Chen in the world announcement were members of the mysterious forces in Yi Chen's previous life. The Seven-Star Tower, Limitless Palace, these mysterious forces in his previous life were like the Special Shifters players. They had obtained special opportunities. What were they trying to do by suddenly congratulating him in the world announcement? Previously, Yi Chen had various guesses about the mysterious forces in his previous life, like the Seven-Star Tower and Limitless Palace. However, he wasn't able to make an accurate judgment. When Yi Chen returned to the real world and met the vengeful giant Golden Bird, he heard about the Special Shifters players from the giant Golden Bird. The veil covering the mysterious forces in his previous life was lifted by Yi Chen. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that the mysterious faction that had never revealed themselves in his previous life had suddenly changed and appeared on the World Channel with great fanfare. This was something that Yi Chen couldn't ignore. At this time, the mysterious forces are trying to get on my good side. Are they afraid that I will find them and destroy them? Or do they also want to participate in the world war and follow me to reap benefits? No, these mysterious forces can't be doing this for the latter reason. If they want to participate in the world war, based on the opportunities they obtained, they don't need to follow me. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed. A cold light flashed in his eyes. No matter what their motives are, as long as they don't make an enemy out of me, everything can be discussed. If they block my path, I will kill them all. After thinking, Yi Chen looked at the door and shouted, "Su Chu!" The moment Yi Chen finished speaking, Su Chu, who had returned to the game world upon receiving Yi Chen's order, hastily entered the door and bowed to Yi Chen. "Su Chu greets the Lord. Did anyone come to find me while I wasn't here?" Yi Chen nodded and looked at Su Chu. Lu Hong had decreed Yi Chen's marriage, and head eunuch Zhang Li was in charge of it. Although the date of the marriage hadn't been set, there were still some formalities. More accurately, the imperial palace would send someone to inform Yi Chen of what to pay attention to and what to prepare for the marriage. If Yi Chen hadn't returned to the game world when the imperial palace sent someone, and no one knew what Yi Chen had gone to do, then Lu Hong would definitely think that Yi Chen had run away from the marriage. This way, Lu Hong, who had just dispelled his suspicions of Yi Chen, would definitely start doubting him again. He might even be afraid of him. This wasn't a result that Yi Chen wanted to see. It was precisely for this reason that Yi Chen had Su Chu return to the game world ahead of time. This way, when the imperial palace sent someone to find Yi Chen, there would be someone to receive them. It wouldn't cause Yi Chen to draw Lu Hong's suspicions because there was no one to receive him. For Yi Chen, what he needed to do now was wait. Wait for the general trend of the world, or rather, the beginning of Dong Da's chaos. After that, it would be time for Yi Chen to completely bare his fangs and sweep over the world. When Su Chu heard Yi Chen's question, he hurriedly bowed and said, "The Lord hasn't sent anyone." "My lord, the palace did not send anyone here. However, Chancellor Guo Yi has sent someone to deliver a letter to my lord for you to take a look." Feng Shao. Yi Chen was slightly taken aback. He took the letter from Su Chu and opened it. He took out the letter and read it. Chapter 630. When Yi Chen saw the contents of the letter sent by Guo Yi, he was stunned. There were not many words in the letter, only 5 words. Who will be the mistress? His meaning was none other than asking Yi Chen who would be the mistress of the house between Zhao Yu, Chan Wan, Kai Mei Mi Zhen, Huang Wan the 5 beautiful Jin sisters, and the soon-to-be married Big Qiao and Little Qiao. Of course, this was just on the surface. It meant that Yi Chen, as the lord, couldn't delay the matter any longer. He had to decide on the Lady of Reincarnation Immortal City as soon as possible. Otherwise, there might be some unforeseen event. For example, the women might try to rope in Yi Chen's subordinates and get rid of their dissident. Or the women's relatives might try to use their connections or even scheme to help their elder sisters, younger sisters, or daughters rise to power, and so on. Then, Yi Chen's backyard, or even the whole Samsara city, would not be peaceful. After all, Yi Chen's subordinates were loyal to Yi Chen, not to Yi Chen's women. Of course, this was what Guo Yi expressed to Yi Chen in the letter. Although Guo Yi did not say it explicitly, Yi Chen could see it. It seemed that Guo Yi, Zhao Yun, and the others really thought that he would only choose one woman to be the mistress. The concept in this era was that there was only one mistress and the rest were concubines, and this concept had been deeply ingrained in the indigenous people of this world. Even though Yi Chen's subordinates vaguely understood Yi Chen's meaning, they still thought that Yi Chen would only choose one woman to be the mistress of Yi Chen's forces. It was for this reason that Guo Yi specially wrote a letter to remind Yi Chen to choose the mistress as soon as possible, so as to avoid trouble. After all, many forces, even empires, were gradually destroyed because of internal instability. Although this was a bit alarmist, this was the truth. Yi Chen knew it very well. However, while Yi Chen understood, he did not care about this at all. The reason was simple. Yi Chen had told the women that everyone was equal and that they would be the mistress in the future. After knowing Yi Chen's meaning, the women all agreed and no one had any resistance. If the women did not agree and insisted on a ranking, they would not hide it from Yi Chen. After all, the women were also loyal to Yi Chen, so they would not deceive Yi Chen. Guo Yi wrote a letter because Yi Chen had not made a formal statement. If Yi Chen had made a formal statement, all these worries would not have existed. Guo Yi, why didn't he just say it directly? Why did he make it so mysterious and I have to guess? However, it was also a blessing to have such a subordinate. Thinking of this, Yi Chen could not help but smile. Then, he looked at Su Chu and asked, Zhongkang, what would you think if I, your lord, wanted to determine 10, 20, or even more mistresses? Ah! Su Chu was stunned when he heard Yi Chen's question. Su Chu had never thought that Yi Chen would ask him this. After coming to his senses, Su Chu's expression turned solemn and he bowed loudly. My lord, if you say there are as many mistresses as you want, then there will be as many. Because this is what my lord said, no one can doubt or mock him. If anyone dares to, I, Su Chu, will definitely cut off his dog head. Great! Hearing this, Yi Chen laughed out loud and then shouted. Yi Chen had asked Su Chu because he wanted to see how his subordinates would react after hearing his decision. The result was just as Yi Chen had expected. After being stunned for a moment, Su Chu chose to support Yi Chen without hesitation. Loyal subordinates were indeed good. They could solve a lot of problems. It was no wonder that Yi Chen thought this way. If Yi Chen's subordinates were not loyal to him, Yi Chen would only need to announce some orders that went against the concept of this era. The result would be chaos within Samsara city. It might not be a big deal if it happened once or twice. However, if it happened too many times, or if the bombs released by Yi Chen were too powerful, then Yi Chen's subordinates would probably all run away. In Yi Chen's previous life, this kind of situation where his subordinates left after recognizing him as their master was not uncommon. The reason was the loyalty of his subordinate. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't have used all sorts of methods to move his subordinates and increase their loyalty. Then, all of them would be loyal to Yi Chen. Thinking of this, Yi Chen could not help but raise his eyebrows. Then, he looked at Su Chu and said, Zhongkang, come back to Samsara Immortal City with me. On the way, choose 100,000 soldiers to be your subordinates and train them. Yes, my lord. Su Chu's eyes lit up when he heard this. He quickly bowed and saluted loudly. When Yi Chen heard this, he chuckled and nodded. Then, he grabbed Su Chu's shoulder and stepped forward. In the next second, Yi Chen and Su Chu disappeared without a trace. In the sky, above the clouds, above the huge floating island with 3 10,000-meter tall mountains, the space suddenly distorted. In the next second, Yi Chen and Su Chu walked out of the distorted space and appeared here. If a player saw the huge floating island hidden above the clouds, he would immediately exclaim in surprise, "Samsara Immortal City!" That's right, this was Samsara Immortal City. The Samsara Immortal City that all players were shocked, envious, and jealous of. When Yi Chen saw the Samsara forest that had evolved into an immortal forest and the 3 10,000-meter tall mountains that had evolved into immortal mountains, he could not help but raise his eyebrows. Although it was his second time seeing it, it was still so King awesome. Yi Chen's Samsara City had evolved into Samsara Immortal City because he had used the Immortal City promotion order. However, to Yi Chen's surprise, the entire Reincarnation Valley, the 3 10,000-meter tall mountains that surrounded the Reincarnation Valley, and the entire Samsara forest outside all participated in the evolution. Then, the mountains became immortal mountains, the forest became immortal forests, and even the land became immortal land. These were all gains that Yi Chen had not expected. With these gains, Yi Chen's plan to expand Samsara Immortal City and accommodate all the people of the Great Han Empire was naturally not that difficult. After all, if Yi Chen wanted to expand the internal space of Samsara Immortal City to accommodate all the people of the Great Han Empire, he had to obtain a large number of immortal-grade materials and integrate them into Samsara Immortal City. However, this was the beginner's area of the three kingdoms. It was extremely difficult to obtain a large number of immortal-grade materials in the beginner's area of the three kingdoms. Even if Yi Chen had not been reborn, he knew how difficult it was. Originally, Yi Chen had thought that only the 3 immortal islands could obtain immortal-grade materials. Who would have thought that Samsara Immortal City would give Yi Chen such a huge gift as soon as it evolved? Otherwise, Yi Chen would not be so happy. Thinking of this, Yi Chen could not help but smile. Then, he quickly flew toward the Reincarnation Valley with Su Chu, who was shocked by the huge island floating in the sky under his feet. After a few breaths, Yi Chen arrived above the tall city wall at the entrance of the Reincarnation Valley. At this moment, the soldiers guarding the city wall of the Reincarnation Valley saw Yi Chen. In the next second, there was a swoosh sound. The soldiers guarding the city wall of the Reincarnation Valley uniformly knelt on one knee and shouted in unison, "Greetings, Lord!" Thousands of people shouted in unison, their voices shaking the sky. Chapter 631. When Yi Chen heard this, he glanced at the soldiers on the city wall and nodded with a smile. Then, he flew directly into the Reincarnation Valley. At this moment, the people in the Reincarnation Immortal City were harvesting the plump rice grains in the fields in groups of 3 to 5. When the shouts of the soldiers reached the valley, the commoners could not help but stop and raise their heads to look. In the next second, the people who were busy in the Reincarnation Valley smiled from the bottom of their hearts. Then, they bowed to Yi Chen, who was flying towards the Reincarnation Immortal City, and said loudly, "Greetings, your lordship! Greetings, your lordship, you of Beach!" The people were very enthusiastic because their lordship, Yi Chen, who had given them a good life, had returned. Yi Chen glanced at the people who were working in the valley and waved his hand with a smile. Then, he flew directly towards the Reincarnation Immortal City. In the sky above the drill ground of the Reincarnation Immortal City, Yi Chen had just arrived. The 41 million soldiers of the Reincarnation Immortal City who were training stopped in unison and looked up in unison when they heard the shout, "Your lordship is back." In the next second, the 41 million soldiers of the Reincarnation Immortal City fell to one knee with a swoosh and shouted loudly, "Greetings, your lordship!" The 41 million soldiers of the Reincarnation Immortal City shouted in unison and the sky buzzed. Yi Chen looked at the drill ground. After returning from the battle with him, the 41 million soldiers of the reincarnation immortal city did not rest, and instead, they trained even harder. After being stunned for a moment, he could not help but smile and nod his head in satisfaction. Looks like my soldiers all have the heart to become stronger. It was no wonder that Yi Chen thought so. After all, Yi Chen had asked the reincarnation Immortal City's army to rest for 3 days after returning to the reincarnation Immortal City. However, the current situation was that the reincarnation Immortal City's army did not even enjoy the 3 days of rest. Instead, they all rushed to the drill ground to train. The truth was obvious. The soldiers wanted to become stronger, and they did not want to waste any time. Otherwise, why would they give up 3 days of rest? As for Yi Chen's generals, such as Guan Er, Zhang San, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, and the others, it was impossible for them to order the soldiers not to rest. It had to be known that the order to rest for 3 days was given by Yi Chen. Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, and Zhang San couldn't possibly go against Yi Chen's orders. Wanting to become stronger was a good thing, but becoming stronger wasn't something that could be achieved by risking one's life. Thinking of this, Yi Chen sighed inwardly. Then he looked at the 41 million soldiers of Samsara City who were kneeling on one knee in the drill ground. Cultivation is about balancing tension and relaxation. Don't overdo it. All of you go back and rest. Reunite with your families. 3 days later, return to the barracks. When the 41 million soldiers of Samsara City heard this, they were all stunned. They had never thought that their lord, Yi Chen, would actually say such a thing. Of course, although they had never thought of it, the soldiers did not think that Yi Chen was wrong. After coming to their senses, the soldiers bowed in unison and answered loudly, "Yes, my lord." Hearing this, Yi Chen nodded with satisfaction and then flew straight to the governor's mansion. As soon as Yi Chen arrived in the hall of the governor's mansion, he saw Gui Dian Xiong, Zhao Yun, Zhao Meng, Guan Er, Kai Yin, Mi Zhu, Tianfeng, and other subordinates waiting for Yi Chen in the hall. Obviously, Gui, Zhao Yun, and the others had heard the news of Yi Chen's return. Otherwise, they would not have come to the hall in such a neat formation to wait for him. Thinking of this, Yi Chen could not help smiling and then entered the hall. In the next second, Gui Dian Xiong, Zhao Yun, Zhao Meng, Guan Er, Gao Shun, Zhang San, Zhang Qi, Kai Yin, Mi Zhu, and Tianfeng bowed to Yi Chen in unison. "Greetings, my lord." When Yi Chen heard this, he chuckled and nodded. Then, he sat down on the main seat. After Yi Chen sat down, Su Chu, who had followed Yi Chen here, hurriedly saluted Gui, Zhao Yun, and the others. After everyone greeted each other, Su Chu automatically sat on the last chair in the row of generals. Seeing this, Yi Chen could not help smiling. Then, he looked at Mi Zhu and asked, "Zizhong, how's the situation of the Golden Scarf soldiers recently?" After killing Zhang Ju, Yi Chen took all the Golden Scarf soldiers into Yuzhou province. Although Yi Chen did not give them the official identity of Yuzhou province's citizens, Yi Chen would not ignore it. After all, these people had been bewitched by Zhang Ju. Although Yi Chen had killed all the leaders of the Golden Scarf soldiers and they all showed sincere regret, Yi Chen would not conclude that those Golden Scarf soldiers sincerely wanted to live a peaceful life. Because of this, Yi Chen asked Mi Zhu about the situation of the Golden Scarf soldiers at once. If the Golden Scarf soldiers were just pretending and playing tricks behind his back, of course, Yi Chen would not be merciful. Hearing Yi Chen's question, Mi Zhu hurriedly got up and bowed loudly, saying, "Reporting to Your Highness, the Golden Scarf soldiers have followed Your Highness's orders and distributed farming tools and oxen, as well as enough food to support their next harvest. According to the report of the spies we recently placed among the Golden Scarf soldiers, the Golden Scarf soldiers have no tendency to rebel. They are very stable and very much like the life Your Highness has arranged." "Very good." Hearing this, Yi Chen nodded in satisfaction. Then, he looked at his subordinates in the hall and said, His Majesty has decreed that Princess Zhaoyang and Princess Chang'e are to be my wives. This is also the reason for my return." Hearing Yi Chen's words, Kai Yin, Zhao Yun, and Mi Zhu immediately became somewhat uncomfortable. However, after Guo Yi deliberately coughed a few times, the three of them quickly regained their composure. Yi Chen, who had been watching his subordinates, especially Kai Yin, Zhao Yun, and Mi Zhu, secretly smiled when he saw this. Then, he glared at Guo Yi and said with a solemn face, "Since ancient times, there has only been one legal wife. However, I am the Lord of Reincarnation, Immortal City. I am not prepared to abide by the customs of the world." So, when Yi Chen said this, the eyes of Zhao Yu's brother, Zhao Yun, Kai Mei-er's father, Kai Yin, and Mi Zhen's brother, Mi Zhu, all lit up. Except for Guo Yi, who looked relaxed, the other subordinates all looked down and quietly waited for Yi Chen's answer. Yi Chen glanced at his subordinates with different expressions, smiled slightly, and then said, "I will have many wives. To be precise, I will have as many legal wives as I have women. This is my decision. Do you have any objections?" Hearing Yi Chen's words, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Gao Shun, Guan Er, Zhang San, Kai Yin, Mi Zhu, Guo Yi, and other subordinates of Yi Chen looked at each other, then stood up, bowed, and said loudly, "Your Highness is wise." Chapter 632. Hearing this, Yi Chen nodded with satisfaction and said, "All right, it's settled. However, this matter can only be spread within the Reincarnation Immortal City for the time being." Right now, Yi Chen was in his territory, and he had officially announced that all of his women were his main wives. This was not a big deal because this was Yi Chen's territory, and no one would dare to say anything about it. Yi Chen was very clear about this. However, even though he was clear about this, he wasn't irrational. To be precise, Yi Chen could not blatantly announce to the world that he would marry as many wives as he wanted. After all, Lu Hong had just decreed that his two daughters, De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, would be betrothed to Yi Chen. If Yi Chen turned around and said, "I'm going to marry as many wives as I want," it would be a big joke. Because this was a serious slap to Lu Hong's face. The consequence of this was that Lu Hong would be enraged and the people of the world would criticize him. This was not the result that Yi Chen wanted to see. For Yi Chen, what he had to do now was to wait. To be precise, he had to wait until the War of the Vassal States began after the chaos of Dongda. At that time, Yi Chen would be able to use troops without any scruples and sweep the world. As for the reason, it was very simple. It was the qi of heaven and earth. If Yi Chen started the war in advance, he could directly overturn Lu Hong's great Han Empire. However, Yi Chen would lose a large part of the qi of heaven and earth. If not for this, Yi Chen would have directly killed Lu Hong and unified the world. As soon as Yi Chen finished speaking, Guo Yi, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Kai Yin, Mi Zhu, Guan Er, Zhang San, and the others bowed in unison and said loudly, "Yes, my lord." When Yi Chen heard this, he chuckled and nodded. Then, he looked at Zhao Yun and asked, "Yunjing, what realm is Bai Ma Yi at now?" "Reporting to my lord, the 100,000 white horse righteous soldiers have all become emperor-level generals." When Zhao Yun heard this, he was slightly stunned. His eyes suddenly lit up, and then he hurriedly bowed. When Yi Chen heard this, he was silent for a moment. "In that case, come with me to explore the secret realm in the underground palace 3 days from now." The underground palace contained the 9 cauldrons of the country protecting 9 cauldrons. Qin Shi Huang relied on this to lock in the pre-Qin dynasty fate and ensure that the souls of his troops were not destroyed. Qin Shi Huang had spent a lot of effort to create an underground secret realm and even set up a trap to kill players. Yi Chen did not care about what he wanted to do. What Yi Chen cared about was the 9 cauldrons of the ancient kingdom. This was because Yi Chen wanted to build a fate dynasty. How could Yi Chen give up on treasures like the 9 cauldrons of the ancient kingdom that could suppress fate? Previously, Yi Chen did not have any ideas about the underground palace because he had only obtained one piece of the 9 cauldrons treasure map fragment. Moreover, the overall strength of his army was not good enough. But now, Yi Chen had reached the god martial realm and his army was strong. Naturally, Yi Chen did not want to continue waiting. And he chose Zhao Yun's by Ma Yi to follow because the pre-Qin army in the underground palace secret realm was not weak. If the soldiers' realms were not high enough, it was very likely that they would be buried in the underground palace secret realm. Of course, if it were not for the world war that would begin in 7 days, Yi Chen really might have sent his army to the underground palace secret realm to farm experience. But now there was no need. The world war in his previous life had been brought forward. Yi Chen had plenty of opportunities to train his troop. Naturally, he would not let his soldiers risk their lives in the underground palace secret realm. Yes, my lord. My lord. When Zhao Yunjing heard this, his expression immediately turned solemn, and he bowed. It was clear that Zhao Yun knew what the underground palace secret realm had to do with it. Otherwise, he would not be so solemn. The moment Zhao Yun finished speaking, Guai, Kai-in, Mizhu, Dian Xiong, Guaner, Zhao Meng, Zhotsang, Zhang San, Zhang He, Chui, Gao Lan, Gao Shun, Su Chu, Zhang Liao, Yen Ro, Han Dang, Qing Pu, Sun Qing, Chen Kun, Tian Feng, and Eugene glanced at each other, and then they all stood up and bowed to Yi Chen. We are willing to follow my lord to the underground palace secret realm. Yi Chen couldn't help but be taken aback at these words. Yi Chen could understand why Dian Xiong, Guan Er, and Zhang San wanted to follow Yi Chen to the underground palace secret realm. After all, once they reached the underground palace secret realm, there would definitely be a battle. As generals, they naturally did not want to back down on this matter. As military advisors, Guai, Chen Kun, and Tian Feng also wanted to go. After all, the underground palace secret realm contained millions of mighty pre-Qin soldiers. It was very likely that special military formations would clash. It was only natural for them to go. But Yi Chen had never imagined that Kai-in and Sun Qing, who were in charge of literature and politics, would also want to go. While Yi Chen was in a daze, Guai stepped forward and bowed to Yi Chen. My lord, after Qin Shi Huang swept through the world and unified the world, he did one thing: burn books of poetry and kill sorcerers. Since then, the 6 arts have been missing or even lost. Feng Xiao, are you saying that the underground palace secret realm contains missing or even lost parts of the 6 arts? Yi Chen's eyes widened and he asked. Guai shook his head and said, Yes, yes. Yes, but also no. Jia, I've studied many secret manuals. The missing or even lost parts of the 6 arts are indeed missing and lost. However, there is a way to retrieve the missing or even lost parts of the 6 arts. Enter the underground palace secret realm. Yi Chen's eyes lit up and he asked. Guai nodded heavily and said, My lord, my lord. My lord, that is indeed the case. Rumor has it that although Qin Shi Huang burned books and buried Confucianism, the secret realm he left behind in the underground palace contained the ultimate embodiment of the 6 arts. It could be statues, mechanisms, or even words. Jia is unable to determine the specific. However, Jia is sure that my lord can enter the underground palace secret realm, but you only have one chance. After that, everything in the underground palace secret realm will be destroyed and cannot be brought out. Even if my lord is extremely powerful, he will not be able to preserve the inheritance of the 6 arts. In that case, Yi Chen's eyes lit up when he heard this. In the next second, Yi Chen stood up abruptly and shouted, That's right. 3 days from now, all of you will come with me to explore the secret realm in the underground palace. Retrieve all the 6 arts for me. Yi Chen valued the 6 arts so much because the 6 arts were not simple. They were rites, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and mathematics. The levels involved were extremely deep. To be precise, the 6 arts that Yi Chen wanted to obtain were related to the 6 great powers. Take calligraphy as an example. If one obtained the true teachings and had enough cultivation, one word could suppress thousands of demons and drive away thousands of evil. In Yi Chen's previous life, he once saw a player who specialized in calligraphy write the word kill by accident. At that moment, the word kill lit up with a dazzling light and burned hundreds of powerful demons who tried to sneak up on him into ashes. This was not a rumor that Yi Chen had heard. Yi Chen had seen it with his own eyes. Later, Yi Chen specially investigated this matter. After all, the scene was too shocking and unimaginable. However, Yi Chen did not find anything after a month of investigation. It was only after a casual chat between cannon fodders that Yi Chen shifted the location of his investigation from the Primordial lands to the Newbie area of the Three Kingdoms. Although Yi Chen could not return to the Newbie area at that time, Yi Chen found some clues in the real world. In the end, Yi Chen targeted the 6 arts of ancient times and got his answer. This was also the fundamental reason why Yi Chen valued Kai Yin, Sun Qing, and other civil officials who did not seem to be of much use to the empire. Because no one knew better than Yi Chen that although they did not seem to be of much use after arriving in the Primordial lands, in fact, each of them had potential. As long as they grasped the right method, each of them could shine like a star in the Primordial lands. Chapter 633. Yes, my lord. When Guai, Kai Yin, Zhao Yunjing, Guan Er, Zhang San, and the others heard this, their expressions turned solemn. They then bowed and said loudly. Yi Chen nodded. He then looked at Kai Yin and said, "That's right. Father-in-law, His Majesty has decreed the marriage. The exact date has not been set yet. This is a joyous occasion. Logically speaking, we should celebrate. However, I don't agree that Reincarnation Immortal City should celebrate this." Lu Hong had decreed the marriage. Once the date was set, Yi Chen would have to marry Princess De Qiao and Princess Chang'e Xiao Qiao. However, the crux of the problem was that Yi Chen could only marry De Qiao and Xiao Qiao. Zhao Yu, Chan Wan, Kai Mayer Mi Zhen, Huang Wan and the 5 Zhen sisters could not bow to heaven and earth with Yi Chen at this time. Otherwise, it would definitely attract criticism from the common people. It was obvious that the emperor of the Great Han Dynasty, Lu Hong, had specially decreed the marriage of the 2 princesses to Yi Chen. However, at this juncture, Yi Chen still wanted to marry someone else. This was 100% a slap in the face, and it was a slap in the face to Lu Hong. Not to mention that Lu Hong would be angry when he found out. Even the common people in the world would not think that Yi Chen did the right thing. Because Yi Chen was not the reason at all. This was the main reason why Yi Chen did not want to hold a celebration when he married De Qiao and Xiao Qiao. Because this way Yi Chen would feel even more guilty in his heart. That's right, he would feel guilty. After all, Zhao Yu, Chan Wan, Kai Mei and the others had been with Yi Chen before De Qiao and Xiao Qiao. However, only De Qiao and Xiao Qiao could marry Yi Chen and bow to heaven and earth. This was truly unfair to the girls. However, Lu Hong had already decreed the marriage. As for Yi Chen, whether it was for himself, or for the Copper Sparrow Terrace that required enough beauties to unleash its power, or because he had to obey Lu Hong's decree, he could not give up on De Qiao and Xiao Qiao. It was precisely because of this that Yi Chen made such a decision. As soon as Yi Chen finished speaking, Kai Yin, who was pleasantly surprised to be able to follow Yi Chen into the secret realm of the underground palace, was immediately stunned. After regaining his senses, Kai Yin hurriedly bowed and said, "My lord." "Absolutely not." Guer Yi, who was next to Kai Yin, also bowed at this moment. "My lord. Marriage is a major event in one's life. In the future, Princess Zhaoyang and Princess Chang'e will both be my lord's wives. We absolutely cannot treat them carelessly. Please reconsider, my lord." Zhao Yun, Mi Zhu, Sun Qing, Chen Kun, and the others looked at each other and then bowed at Yi Chen in unison. Hearing this, Yi Chen was slightly stunned and then frowned. Yi Chen frowned. He was not angry at his subordinates, but because Yi Chen really did not consider the feelings of De Qiao and Xiao Qiao. Once Yi Chen married De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, the two sisters would definitely be Yi Chen's official wives and not his concubines. If Yi Chen did not celebrate in his territory, how could De Qiao and Xiao Qiao feel good in their hearts? Thinking of this, Yi Chen sighed inwardly. Then, he looked at Guo Yi and said, Feng Xiao, prepare a notice and write the matter of the reincarnation Immortal City's mistress on it. Post it at the city gate as soon as possible. Yi Chen wrote his decision on the notice and posted it. Naturally, he wanted to tell everyone in his territory one thing. The mistress of reincarnation Immortal City was not only Princess Zhao Yang and Princess Chang'e, who were about to be married. Zhao Yu, Chan Wan, Kai Mei Mi Zhen, Huang Wan'er, and the five Zhen sisters were also the mistresses of reincarnation Immortal City. As for the fact that there would only be Big Qiao and Little Qiao at the wedding and not Zhao Yu, Chan Wan, Kai Mei and the other girls, Yi Chen would not make it clear. However, after the citizens saw the notice, they could easily guess. In this way, Zhao Yu, Chan Wan, Kai Mei Mi Zhen, Huang Wan'er, and the five Zhen sisters would naturally not be so sad in their hearts. In fact, Yi Chen did not really understand the women of this era. If he did, Yi Chen would be clear about one thing. Whether it was Zhao Yu, Chan Wan, Kai Mei Mi Zhen, or the other girls, all of them would be deeply moved by Yi Chen's actions. Moreover, they would be in a complete mess. One must know that the women of this era did not have any status. However, Yi Chen was already a peerless man for being so considerate to the women. Yes, my lord. Guo Yi hurriedly bowed and said. Yi Chen nodded. He then looked at Kai Yin and said, That's right. Father-in-law, after the wedding date is set, the reincarnation Immortal City will host a grand banquet for 7 days. All expenses will be waived. Yes, my lord. When Kai Yin heard this, he nodded with a smile on his face and bowed in response. Kai Yin was naturally happy because Yi Chen, the general of agile cavalry of the great Han Empire, the king of Yuzhou, and the lord of the reincarnation Immortal City, cared about the feelings of the women. In this way, Kai Yin's daughter, Kai Mei would naturally live a happy life with Yi Chen. In fact, it was not only Kai Yin who was happy. Zhao Yu's brother, Zhao Yun, and Mi Zhen's brother, Mi Zhu, were also very happy. Although women were sacrifices in this era, feelings such as kinship still existed, and some were even very deep. When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled and nodded. Then, he looked at Guo Yi and asked, Feng Xiao, is the Tao comprehension tea effective on you? Yi Chen did not forget that Guo Yi was born with the heaven's jealousy, and had a short lifespan. It was also because of this that Yi Chen specially gave the women a lot of Tao comprehension tea when they arrived in the real world. He also asked them to bring some for Guo Yi, Kai Yin, and the others. His purpose was to let his subordinates have a chance to be resurrected like the players. After all, every piece of Tao comprehension tea could give the players, or natives, a chance to be resurrected. When Guo Yi heard this, an extremely moved expression appeared on his face. He then bowed to Yi Chen in an extremely solemn manner and said, It's my great fortune to be able to follow you, my lord. No effect. Yi Chen's face darkened when he heard this. He then asked in a deep voice, My lord, the heaven's jealousy is extraordinary. Unless you transcend this world, the heaven's jealousy will exist forever. Guo Yi's heart warmed when he heard this. He then bowed and said with a smile. Yi Chen frowned again when he heard this. He then looked at Guo Yi and said seriously, Feng Xiao, if the heaven doesn't do as you wish, the sharp sword of the reincarnation Immortal City will be unsheathed immediately. Do you understand? Thank you, my lord. Guo Yi's heart trembled when he heard this. He then forcibly controlled his voice, which was about to change pitch, and bowed deeply. Guo Yi was a super-class historical general. How could he not understand Yi Chen's meaning? If the heaven's jealousy was triggered in advance, his lord, Yi Chen, would directly use his troops to conquer the world. Then, he would establish a country and ascend. It was because Guo Yi understood Yi Chen's meaning that he was so moved that he almost choked. Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Kai Yin, and the others looked at each other. Then, they bowed together and said loudly, "We swear to follow you, my lord." Obviously, these subordinates of Yi Chen also understood what Yi Chen meant. They also knew what the heaven's jealousy was. When Yi Chen heard this, he glanced at his subordinate who stepped forward to express his stance. He let out a long sigh and then shouted, "Good! It's settled." For Yi Chen, the heaven's luck would be lost if he mobilized his troops in advance. However, it was much less than losing a super-class historical official who was loyal to him. Moreover, even if the heaven's luck was lost, it would not affect Yi Chen's plan. It had to be known that Yi Chen had only taken away the heaven and earth providence of the three kingdoms when he ascended. Compared to the heaven and earth providence of the great desolate world, it paled in comparison and was not even worth mentioning. Of course, it was undeniable that losing part of the heaven's luck from the novice area of the three kingdoms would affect Yi Chen's empire. However, as long as Yi Chen could wantonly plunder the heaven's luck from other countries during the World War, he could solve this problem with the help of the 9 guarding cauldrons. Of course, it would be best if Guo Yi's heaven's jealousy was not triggered in advance. In this way, Yi Chen could obtain more heaven's luck and ascend. In this way, Yi Chen's Samsara Empire would have a more stable foundation. Then, it would be more stable in the untainted world. Whether Guo Yi's heaven's jealousy was triggered in advance or not, the Samsara Immortal City would start a massacre on the day of the World War. Thinking of this, Yi Chen suddenly opened his eyes. Then, an overbearing and powerful aura suddenly burst out. Chapter 634. When Guo Yi, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, and the others sensed Yi Chen's tyrannical and domineering aura, they glanced at each other, then turned to Yi Chen and bowed. "Yes, Master." To Guo Yi, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, and the others, the great Han Empire's status in their hearts had long ago dropped to the lowest level. Even Sun Qing, who was known as the talented imperial aide, and had always wanted to revitalize the great Han Empire, was no exception. It could be said that Yi Chen's subordinates had already steeled their hearts to follow Yi Chen. Even if Yi Chen were to raise his flag and attack Lu Hong's great Han Empire, they would still follow Yi Chen without hesitation. When Yi Chen heard the heartfelt cries of his subordinates, he couldn't help but feel a warmth in his heart. He loudly laughed. "To be able to receive your assistance is truly the greatest fortune of this year's life. To be able to follow Master is also the greatest fortune of all of us." When Guo Yi, Zhao Yunjing, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, and the others heard this, they all smiled and bowed. Yi Chen heartily laughed and then waved his right hand. 10 some 2 world stones instantly flew over to Guan Er, Zhang San, Zhang Liao, Mi Zhu, Kai Yin, Chen Kun, Tian Feng, and Sun Qing. Guan Er, Zhang San, Zhang Liao, Mi Zhu, and Kai Yin were all stunned to see the 2 world stones floating in front of them, and then they excitedly shouted. 2 world stones. It was clear that Guan Er, Zhang San, Zhang Liao, Zhang He, and Gao Lan all knew what the 2 world stones were for, and they all wanted to go to the real world. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been so happy. As for why they wanted to go to the real world, the reason was very simple. Because the real world was where their master, Yi Chen, lived. Only by being able to freely travel to the real world would one be truly accepted by Yi Chen. No one told Yi Chen this, but it was true in the hearts of Guan Er, Zhang San, Zhang Liao, Mi Zhu, Kai Yin, and Sun Qing. Now that Yi Chen had taken out the 2 world stone, it was undoubtedly telling them that the recognition they had been waiting for had really come. After realizing this, how could they not be excited? How could they not be excited? After all, they were either civil officials or military generals. What they looked forward to the most was their lord's approval. Yi Chen glanced at his excited subordinates and smiled. Then, he said, "Let's go." "That's right, it's the two-world stone. Previously, because I had to go on an expedition to quell the rebellion, I didn't have the chance to distribute the two-world stone. Now that I'm free, I can't delay any longer. However, I still want to ask you one thing. Are you willing to follow me to the world I'm in?" Yi Chen naturally knew what his subordinates were thinking and what they cared about. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't have explained why he hadn't distributed the two-world stone. Of course, Yi Chen's explanation didn't mean that Yi Chen was worried that his subordinates would betray him. It also didn't mean that Yi Chen's subordinates would harbor any negative feelings toward Yi Chen. To be more precise, Yi Chen had explained this because Yi Chen knew the importance of putting himself in someone else's shoes. As long as Yi Chen treated his subordinates with sincerity, he would definitely receive more in return. And in this process, all Yi Chen needed to do was say a few words. Yi Chen was domineering and unreasonable, but Yi Chen wouldn't be an arrogant emperor who ignored the thoughts of his subordinates. Therefore, after Yi Chen sensed the thoughts of his subordinates, he made a special explanation. Guan Er, Zhang San, Kai Yin, Zhang Ju, Mi Zhu, and the others heard Yi Chen's words and their expressions turned solemn. Then, they bowed to Yi Chen and said loudly, "We're willing." Then, they picked up the two-world stone floating in front of them and chose to use it without hesitation. When Yi Chen saw this, he nodded with a smile and said, "That's right." He said, "Hold hands and don't resist. I'll bring you to the world I'm in." "Yes, my lord." When Guan Er, Zhang San, Kai Yin, Zhang Ju, and Mi Zhu heard this, they bowed and held hands. Soon, they were connected. When Yi Chen saw this, he smiled. Then, he grabbed Kai Yin's arm, who was closest to him, and with a thought, he went offline. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, more than 10 pillars of light suddenly descended from the main hall of the Reincarnation Immortal City's City Lord Mansion. Yi Chen, Guan Er, Zhang San, Kai Yin, Zhang He, and the others, who had brought their subordinates to the real world, appeared here again. After Yi Chen opened his eyes, he glanced at his subordinates, who were still in shock and ecstasy. He smiled faintly and then looked at Guo Yi. "Feng Xiao, there will be changes in my world in 2 days. At that time, I'll send troops to guard the Reincarnation City in the real world. Who do you think is the best person to send?" "My lord, this." When Guo Yi heard Yi Chen's question, his face stiffened and he hurriedly bowed. Guo Yi was very smart. He naturally knew that Yi Chen's question wasn't easy to answer. After all, if he sent troops to guard the Reincarnation City in Yi Chen's world, he would have to send a general. No matter who Guo Yi chose, it might upset the general who was going to guard the Reincarnation City in the real world. But even if he was upset, Guo Yi had to name a person. This was because Yi Chen had thrown this question at him. His purpose was to make Guo Yi a scapegoat. Although Guo Yi was a little helpless, he couldn't help but say it. After all, Yi Chen was his lord. Of course, Guo Yi wouldn't bear a grudge because of this. This was common sense. Moreover, this matter would definitely not be rare in the future. The only thing that Guo Yi didn't expect was that he would be the scapegoat. "Feng Xiao, you have a candidate?" When Yi Chen heard this, he calmly glanced at Guo Yi, who was extremely conflicted, and asked. When Guo Yi heard this, he looked at Yi Chen with some hidden bitterness. Then, he was stunned. In the next second, Guo Yi looked again at Guan Er, Zhang San, Zhang He, and the others who had returned from their first trip to the real world. Then, he looked at Yi Chen and asked, "Has there been any new changes in the Reincarnation City in your world, Lord?" When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded with a smile and said, "Yes, I placed some high-grade spirit veins there. The spirit qi there is very dense." When Guo Yi heard this, he was slightly stunned. Then, his eyes suddenly lit up. In the next second, Guo Yi bowed extremely solemnly and said, "My lord, I once read an ancient book. High-grade spirit veins contain an extremely large amount of spirit chi. No matter who cultivates with the help of high-grade spirit veins, their progress will be incomparably fast. Therefore, I believe that the general with the lowest realm in the reincarnation immortal city is most suitable to guard the reincarnation city in your world. Reporting to my lord, this general is willing to go. Zhou Tsang stepped forward after hearing Guiyi's words. Then, he bowed to Yi Chen and said loudly. Chapter 635. When Yi Chen heard this, he immediately smiled. Then, he looked at Zhou Tsang and said, "Since that's the case, I'll leave my safety in your hands. This general swears to protect the safety of my lord." When Zhou Tsang heard this, he clasped his hands together and roared at Yi Chen. After hearing this, Yi Chen nodded his head in satisfaction, before a thought crossed his mind. In the next second, 10,000 two-world stones appeared in the main hall of the Castellan residence. Yi Chen couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he saw the 10,000 two-realm stones in the hall. When the auction started, he would mention that the two-world stones could be used as a trading currency. He should be able to get quite a lot of them. The two-world stone wasn't a precious treasure, but it was necessary to travel between the real world and the game world. If a player obtained a two-world stone and used it on an aboriginal, he would realize that one two-world stone was all it took to bring a person from the game world to the real world. If a player used the two-world stone on himself, he would realize that his body could also enter the game world. Moreover, the increase in strength wouldn't decrease. To be more precise, no matter how much one's strength increased in the game world, as long as one returned to the real world, it would be 100% revealed. It wouldn't be like before, where one's strength increased in the game, but when one returned to the real world, they would only be able to display 20% or 40% of their strength. It could be said that the two-world stone was of great help to the players. It could even stimulate a large portion of the players. After all, the players wanted to become stronger. Summoning the aboriginals to the real world or entering the game world could make the players stronger quickly. This was also the fundamental reason why Yi Chen didn't mention the two-world stone when he announced the auction on the World Channel. To be more precise, Yi Chen didn't want the players to know the use of the two-world stone so quickly. At least before the auction started, he couldn't let the players know that Yi Chen, this crazy cheater, was interested in the two-world stone. Otherwise, the players would definitely use the two-world stone to test it, just like how they did with the Enlightenment stone. Once the players discovered the true use of the two-world stone, they definitely wouldn't use it as a currency and use it in Yi Chen's upcoming auction. In this way, Yi Chen's plan to wantonly purchase two-world stones would fail. This was not what Yi Chen wanted to see. Of course, even if Yi Chen's plan really failed, Yi Chen wouldn't care. After all, among Yi Chen's subordinates, apart from the 10,000 ordinary soldiers, there were also 10,000 Samsara Legion veterans who could enter the real world. They had used the two-world stone a long time ago. With them, even if they did not have 10,000 ordinary soldiers, they could still protect Samsara City in the real world for Yi Chen. Of course, that was before the players ascended to the Primordial world. If the players ascended to the Primordial world, their strength would increase by leaps and bounds. The 10,000 Samsara Legion veterans wouldn't be able to protect Samsara City. However, this possibility didn't exist because by the time the players ascended, Yi Chen would have already established a nation and ascended to the Primordial world. In the Primordial world, items like the two-world stone weren't hard to obtain. At least, Yi Chen knew many places where he could obtain the two-world stone. The only downside was that the drop rate of the two-world stone was very low. However, this wasn't a problem for Yi Chen, who was blessed with innate merit points. Others might not be able to obtain it, but if Yi Chen went to obtain it, he would definitely obtain it. Then, he would obtain it and it would be a huge drop. It was precisely because of this that Yi Chen had exchanged all his points for enlightenment stones and void stones after the Golden Turban Rebellion and the Devil Race's invasion storyline ended. He had not exchanged for a single two-world stone. After all, the two-world stone was dispensable to Yi Chen. Of course, the best outcome would be to obtain the two-world stones now, and a large number of them at that. This way, Yi Chen would be able to bring all the new recruits of Samsara City to Samsara City in the real world. With the support of the upper spiritual vein, it would be hard for the soldier's strength not to increase by leaps and bounds. At this thought, Yi Chen couldn't help but smirk. Then, he looked at Zhou Tsang and said, "Select 10,000 soldiers with the lowest cultivation realms and bring them to Samsara City in my world. As for the arrangement of the soldiers' shifts, you can decide for yourself." "Yes, my lord. My lord." When Zhou Tsang heard this, he nodded his head heavily and bowed. Yi Chen smiled, then he looked at Mi Zhu and said, "Zizhong, I've found the location of the expeditionary village. I'll move Samsara Immortal City to the expeditionary village later. At that time, send the lumberjacks to collect the Millennium Black Ironwood as soon as possible. Then, order the blacksmiths and shipbuilders to focus on building heaven-level equipment and heaven-level warship. In 7 days, Samsara Immortal City will go overseas to fight." The expeditionary village was the place where Yi Chen obtained the barbaric rhinoceros. After being teleported there, Yi Chen discovered the Millennium Black Ironwood, a special material that could improve the grade of equipment. Then, he built the expeditionary village there. As for his purpose, other than occupying the Millennium Black Ironwood, the rest was to use the expeditionary village as a springboard to go overseas to fight. However, Yi Chen used a one-time item to go to that place. Once the time was up, the passage would close. Moreover, at that time, Yi Chen hadn't mastered the power of space and didn't have the Void Stone to create a secondary teleportation formation. Therefore, he couldn't create a secondary teleportation formation in the expeditionary village. Therefore, in the end, Yi Chen could only send Zhao Heng and many civilians to develop the expeditionary village after the village was built. Now, Yi Chen's power of space was extremely strong. His divine sense was also very strong. Naturally, he could easily lock onto the expeditionary village and teleport there. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that Yi Chen would open the Underground Palace Secret Realm in 3 days and participate in the World War in 7 days. Therefore, Yi Chen had to make use of the Millennium Black Ironwood immediately and forge heaven-level equipment for the soldiers. Of course, there was also the heaven-level warship. After all, Yi Chen's enemies weren't only on land when he went overseas to fight. There were also neighboring countries. Without warships, how could the soldiers of the Reincarnation Immortal City attack the coastal countries? Of course, Yi Chen could use space teleportation to transport the soldiers over and start the war directly. However, what if the enemies ran to the sea? Would Yi Chen have to do it himself every time, fly everywhere and attack everywhere? Of course not. One had to know that the purpose of Yi Chen's participation in the World War was not only to snatch the heaven and earth fate and treasures of foreign countries, but more importantly, it was to train the soldiers. If Yi Chen attacked, how could he train the soldiers? Yes, my lord. Mi Zhu's face turned solemn when he heard this. He then bowed and saluted loudly. Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Zhang He, Gao Shun, Zhao Meng, and the other generals' eyes lit up when they heard this. Obviously, Yi Chen's words had stimulated them greatly. That was the truth. Whether it was Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guan Er, Zhang San, Zhang He, or the others, what they wanted most was to be able to lead the soldiers into battle. This was because they were generals who were born for the battlefield. As for where the battlefield was, they didn't care at all. As long as they could go to the battlefield and fight for their lord, Yi Chen, they would be happy. The corners of Yi Chen's mouth curled up involuntarily as he glanced at his excited subordinates. Then, he gave a thought. In the next second, the space in front of the reincarnation immortal city started to distort. Then, the reincarnation immortal city flew into the distorted space and disappeared in a breath. Chapter 636. Above the vast sea, the space above an unknown island was suddenly distorted. In the next second, an incomparably huge floating island appeared here. As the huge floating island appeared, the busy villagers and the soldiers guarding the village were all stunned. Then, they looked up at the sky at the same time. In the next second, exclamations and shouts could be heard everywhere. "Oh my God! What is that? Quick! Go and report to the village chief. Alert! Everyone, alert!" 3 loud shouts were heard along with the villagers' shouts. In the next second, 10,000 soldiers with diamond-level equipment drew their bows and aimed at the floating island that suddenly appeared in the sky. Although these soldiers had shocked expressions on their faces, there was also a very strong worried expression, but none of them chose to retreat or shout. Clearly, this was a group of well-trained and strong-willed soldiers. Otherwise, they would have been at a loss after seeing the huge floating island in the sky. Just when the soldiers on the island were on alert and the villagers were running toward the village in a panic, a young man suddenly appeared at the entrance of the village with a group of generals and officials. The 10,000 soldiers and the 3 generals who were guarding the floating island in the sky were stunned when they saw the young man. Then, they knelt down on one knee at the same time and greeted him loudly. "Greetings, my lord." They had never expected that the huge floating island that suddenly appeared was brought by their lord, the lord of reincarnation immortal city, the king of Yuzhou, and the great Han Empire's general of agile cavalry, Yi Chen. Shock, confusion, and then ecstasy. This was what the 10,000 soldiers of reincarnation immortal city, who were guarding the expeditionary village, felt at this moment. For the soldiers, no matter who the enemy was, they would not back down. This was because they were ordered to guard the expeditionary village. They could not back down even if they had to die. Otherwise, they would not be able to explain to their lord, Yi Chen. They would also not be able to explain to their parents and relatives. The most serious thing was that they would not be able to forgive themselves. This was because their lord, Yi Chen, was the reason why they were still alive and living well. It was their lord, Yi Chen, who gave them a new life, who gave them everything. Without Yi Chen, they would have either starved to death or been killed by the rebel army. They would not be like they were now, wearing equipment that made people jealous, receiving enviable salaries, and enjoying benefits that made people jealous. Therefore, even when they saw the huge island where the reincarnation immortal city was located, they did not cower at all due to the fear they felt from the mystery in their hearts. And now they knew one thing. The huge floating island in the sky was brought to them by their lord, Yi Chen. Other than shock, they were still shocked and then ecstatic. This was because their master, Yi Chen, was able to own a huge floating island. Clearly, he had the means of an immortal. How could they not be excited to be able to follow such a master? How could they not be excited? Yi Chen glanced at the ecstatic soldiers, smiled, and then said, "That's right." He then said, "All of you have worked hard to guard the expeditionary village. Each of you will be rewarded with 100 gold coins, a set of heaven-grade equipment, and a saint-grade technique." As soon as Yi Chen finished his words, the 10,000 soldiers guarding the expeditionary village were all stunned. After regaining their senses, the soldiers shouted with ecstasy, "We pledge our lives to follow our lord." The soldiers guarding the expeditionary village did not expect that their lord, Yi Chen, would give them such a great reward. For them, just the 100 gold coins alone was enough to make them extremely excited. Who would have thought that their lord, Yi Chen, would not only give them 100 gold coins, but also a set of heaven-grade equipment and a saint-grade technique? Even if the soldiers were born poor and did not have much knowledge, It was impossible for them not to know what these two things represented. Although they had not seen the legendary top generals of the great Han Empire, they had heard many rumors. No matter how stupid they were, they knew one thing. Those top generals who left their names in history did not necessarily all have saint-grade techniques and heaven-grade equipment. But now their lord, Yi Chen, had rewarded them with saint-grade techniques and heaven-grade equipment. How could they not be shocked and excited? After the shock and excitement, there was a strong sense of gratitude, as well as an uncontrollable desire to pledge their loyalty. Yi Chen glanced at the shocked and overjoyed soldiers. With a wave of his right hand, 10,000 saint-grade techniques instantly appeared in front of the soldiers. In the next second, Yi Chen chuckled and said, "Just learn the techniques. As for the heaven-grade equipment, you can change them after they are created." Yi Chen had obtained quite a few heaven-grade equipment during the Golden Turban Rebellion. However, those were not standard equipment and were not suitable for the soldiers to use. Otherwise, Yi Chen would have directly rewarded the heaven-grade equipment to the soldiers instead of waiting for the heaven-grade equipment to be created before giving them to the soldiers. "Yes, my lord." The 10,000 soldiers of Samsara City who were guarding the expeditionary village bowed and replied loudly. Then, they picked up the saint-grade techniques in front of them and used them without hesitation. Seeing this, Yi Chen smiled. Then, he looked at the three generals, Zhou Xiong, Zhou Hu and Zhou Bao, who had appeared automatically when the expeditionary village was built. He said, "The three of you have been guarding the expeditionary village ever since you followed me. The living conditions here are difficult, but you have never complained or slacked off. You must be rewarded." After saying this, Yi Chen waved his right hand. 3 boxes of gold coins, 3 books of Xiantian techniques, and 3 sets of heaven-grade equipment instantly appeared in front of the 3 generals. Zhou Xiong, Zhou Hu, and Zhou Bao were overjoyed when they saw the gold coins, poser, and techniques in front of them. When they saw the grades of the techniques, they were all stunned. They had guessed that Yi Chen would reward them. After all, Yi Chen had just rewarded the soldiers. However, Zhou Xiong, Zhou Hu, and Zhou Bao did not expect that their lord, Yi Chen, would reward them so generously that it was beyond their imagination. The 3 boxes of gold coins were nothing. The 3 sets of heaven-grade equipment that were suitable for them were also nothing. These were not beyond their expectations. However, the 3 books of Xiantian techniques were different. The 3 of them were all generals. Although they were not famous historical figures, they still knew what Xiantian techniques meant. Xiantian techniques were far superior to the top techniques in this world. Moreover, it was impossible for them to appear in this world. But now these impossible techniques were placed in front of them. How could they not be shocked? After coming to their senses, Zhou Xiong, Zhou Hu, and Zhou Bao exclaimed in unison, "Xiantian techniques." Hearing this, Yi Chen smiled and nodded. Then, he said, "That's right. It's Xiantian technique. The 3 of you have been following me since before I rose to power. Moreover, you have been loyal to me. Naturally, you will receive these rewards. We swear to follow you until death. If we violate this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy us." Hearing this, Zhou Xiong, Zhou Hu, and Zhou Bao felt a warmth in their hearts. Then, they looked at Yi Chen with excitement and shouted loudly. Hearing this, Yi Chen smiled and nodded. Then, he said, "I believe you." When Yi Chen arrived at the expeditionary village, the first thing he did was to reward the soldiers and commanders of the expeditionary village. He even did it in front of his subordinates because he wanted to tell them one thing. Their lord, Yi Chen, was a nostalgic person. Moreover, he liked loyal subordinate. As for rewards for contributions, that was a given. Moreover, Yi Chen was never stingy with his rewards. Of course, Yi Chen's subordinates were all loyal. They would never betray Yi Chen. However, this did not stop Yi Chen from doing this. This was because this was the way of the emperor. After Yi Chen officially established the country, he would often use it. Of course, if it were not for the fact that Yi Chen had not yet established the country, Yi Chen would not mind showing his subordinates and the whole world the wrath of an emperor. Chapter 637. After hearing Yi Chen's words, Zhou Xiong, Zhou Hu, and Zhou Bao felt a surge of warmth in their hearts. They looked at each other and bowed to Yi Chen. Then, they picked up the Xiantian cultivation method and used it. At this moment, Zhao Heng, who had heard the news from the villagers, rushed to the entrance of the village. When he saw Yi Chen at the entrance of the expedition village, he was stunned. Then, he rushed to Yi Chen. Yi Chen looked at the white-haired Zhao Heng and sighed secretly. Then, he moved his feet and arrived in front of Zhao Heng in an instant. When Zhao Heng saw this, he immediately stopped in his tracks. Then, he solemnly bowed to Yi Chen and said, "Zhao Heng greets the Lord. Thank you for your hard work." Yi Chen smiled and nodded. Then, he said seriously. When Zhao Heng heard Yi Chen's words of concern, he was moved to tears. To Zhao Heng, getting such an answer from Yi Chen was more important than any reward. After wiping the tears from the corners of his eyes, Zhao Heng shook his head and bowed solemnly. "To be able to work for my lord is a blessing that I have cultivated for 3 lifetimes. It's not hard for me at all. If it weren't for my old age, I would even want to go into battle and kill the enemy for my lord to repay my lord's kindness." When Yi Chen heard this, he felt warm in his heart. Then, he patted Zhao Heng's shoulder and said solemnly, "The day of the nation's ascension is not far away. At that time, the 100 years limit in the mortal world will be far away from you. So, there's no need to say that you're old. You have a better future ahead of you. Trust me." Since Yi Chen entered the game world, Zhao Heng had been following Yi Chen. He took care of the Reincarnation Village and Reincarnation City for Yi Chen. It could be said that Yi Chen's rapid rise was not only because of Yi Chen himself, but also because of Zhao Heng's hard work in the beginning. Although Zhao Heng didn't seem to have done much, and he didn't contribute much, his contributions were real. To Yi Chen, how could Yi Chen ignore someone who had chosen to follow him when he was still in the immortal realm? It was also because of this reason that Yi Chen told Zhao Heng that the entire nation's ascension was not far away. As for the goal, it was to dispel the worries that Zhao Heng had because of his age and fill him with hope for the future. Of course, this hope was real and not an illusion, because the time when Yi Chen swept through the world was indeed not far away. At that time, Yi Chen would establish a country and then ascend to the untainted land. As for Yi Chen's subordinates, whether it was Zhao Heng, Guo Yi, or the citizens of Yi Chen, they would all benefit from it. This was because in the great desolate world, it was simply too easy for humans to break through the 100-year limit. When Zhao Heng heard Yi Chen's words, he was stunned for a moment before his eyes lit up. In the next second, Zhao Heng bowed excitedly and said, "It is my honor to follow you, my lord." When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled and nodded. Then, with a wave of his right hand, a book of Xiantian cultivation method and 10 leaves of enlightenment tea appeared in an instant. Then, Yi Chen handed them to Zhao Heng. When Zhao Heng saw this, he was stunned for a moment. When he came back to his senses, he hurriedly received it with great respect and held it in his hand. When Zhao Heng saw the grade of the cultivation method in his hand, he was stunned. Then, he looked at Yi Chen and said with great emotion, "My lord, I'm already over 60 years old. There won't be any effect if I continue to practice it. Why don't you give this cultivation method to the general who needs it? It's useless now, but it will be useful after the entire nation ascends. Just take it with peace of mind. Besides, there are many of these cultivation methods. Don't think too much about it." Yi Chen couldn't help but smile when he heard this. When Zhao Heng heard this, he was stunned again. Zhao Heng didn't expect Yi Chen to say that there were many Xiantian cultivation method. When he came back to his senses, Zhao Heng nodded heavily and bowed. "Thank you for your gift, my lord." When Zhao Heng finished speaking, He directly used the Xiantian cultivation method and carefully put away the 10 leaves of enlightenment tea. Zhao Heng knew that his lord, Yi Chen, always gave good things. Naturally, he didn't think that the 10 leaves of enlightenment tea would be ordinary tea leaf. Otherwise, Zhao Heng wouldn't have carefully put away the enlightenment tea and especially put it in his clothes. At this moment, Zhao Meng ran in front of Zhao Heng and bent his knees. With a bang, he knelt on the ground. In the next second, Zhao Meng kowtowed to Zhao Heng with tears in his eyes. Your son, Zhao Meng, pays his respects to Lord Father. Your son can't serve you by your side, please forgive me. Serve my ass. I'm not old enough for you to serve me. What you need to do is to serve the Lord well and be loyal. Zhao Heng was enraged when he heard this, and then he roared loudly. When Zhao Meng heard this, he nodded heavily and replied, Yes, Father. That's my good son. When Zhao Heng heard this, he nodded in satisfaction and helped Zhao Meng up. After carefully sizing up Zhao Meng, he couldn't help but be stunned and then sighed. I didn't expect my son to become a saint-level general in just a few months. Good. Good. When Zhao Meng heard this, he looked at Yi Chen with great gratitude and then looked at Zhao Heng and said solemnly, Your son is the only one who can rely on you. This child's achievements today are all thanks to the Lord's bestowment. Without the Lord, this child probably wouldn't even be able to reach the king level. When Zhao Heng heard this, he nodded heavily and then looked at Yi Chen and bowed. My son's achievements are all thanks to the Lord's nurturing. Please accept a bow from your humble servant. Zhao Meng is a general and has good potential. If he doesn't work hard, it's useless no matter how much I give him, Yi Chen said with a smile. When Zhao Heng heard this, he bowed again and then said solemnly, My lord, if my son doesn't cherish the opportunity you have bestowed upon him, your humble servant will break his dog legs even if you don't say it. When Zhao Heng said this, Yi Chen couldn't help but be stunned. Then, the corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. F*ck, dog legs. Just as Yi Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry, Zhao Meng's face flushed red. As for Yi Chen's subordinates, they all looked at each other with strange expressions on their faces. Everyone wanted to laugh, but unfortunately, they couldn't. It was really uncomfortable to hold it in. When Zhao Yun saw this, he shook his head helplessly and then stepped forward and bowed to Zhao Heng. Zhao Yun pays his respects to second uncle. Yunjing, how has Xiao Yu been recently? Zhao Heng, who had already realized what he had just said, coughed forcefully twice. Then, he looked at Zhao Yunjing and asked. When Zhao Yunjing heard this, he smiled faintly and then bowed. Thank you for your concern, second uncle. Xiao Yu is doing very well. My lord loves Xiao Yu very much. Good, good, little Yu is blessed. Zhao Heng chuckled and nodded when he heard this, then said. When Zhao Yunjing heard this, he smiled faintly and then nodded seriously. In Zhao Yun's opinion, his sister Zhao Yu was indeed blessed to be able to follow his lord, Yi Chen. This was because Yi Chen was really powerful and loved Zhao Yu very much. Moreover, Zhao Yu was really blessed. Most importantly, Zhao Yun knew one thing. His lord, Yi Chen, would definitely become an immortal in the future, an immortal. Although Zhao Yun didn't know what the world would be like after immortal ascension, just immortality was enough to prove Zhao Yu's blessing. This was because Yi Chen had always cherished the people around him and was never stingy with good things. If there was a need to give examples, Zhao Yun could easily give many examples. For example, a few hours ago, when Zhao Yu, who had gone to visit Yi Chen in the real world, returned to the reincarnation immortal city in the game world, she actually emitted the aura of a powerhouse. This was no small matter. After Zhao Yun sensed the aura of a powerhouse emitted by Zhao Yu, he was afraid that something would happen to Zhao Yu. Therefore, he specially inquired about it. Then, he found out something that shocked him. His lord, Yi Chen, actually gave the god-level youth-retaining fruit, which could strengthen one's foundation to the point that it could absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth by itself, to all the girls, including Zhao Yu. If this still didn't prove that Yi Chen cherished all the girls, what else could be used to prove it? It was also because of this that the only remaining worry in Zhao Yun's heart completely disappeared without a trace. This was because his sister, Zhao Yu, would soon become more powerful than him. Although this feeling made Zhao Yun somewhat uncomfortable, Zhao Yun was sincerely happy that Zhao Yu could follow Yi Chen. Yi Chen glanced at the serious Zhao Yun and smiled. Then, he looked at Gui Yi and said, Feng Shao, after the Millennium Black Ironwood cutting starts, send some people to Yuzhou and find some people to build a new village where the Reincarnation Valley used to be. After saying that, Yi Chen waved his right hand and a gold-level village creation token instantly appeared in his right hand. Then, Yi Chen threw it to Gui Yi. Seeing this, Gui Yi hurriedly reached out to catch it and then asked, My lord, should we send some more soldiers there to put on a show? Gui Yi had long known that Lu Hong was afraid of Yi Chen, so he knew why Yi Chen asked him to build a village where the Reincarnation Immortal City used to be. Other than putting on a show for Lu Hong and letting Lu Hong know that the Reincarnation Immortal City was really destroyed when the demon clan invaded, so as to dispel his suspicion of Yi Chen, there was nothing else. Although Yi Chen was about to marry De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, without putting on a show for Lu Hong couldn't completely rest assured about Yi Chen. After hearing Gui Yi's question, Yi Chen thought for a moment and then said, That's fine. Just send some soldiers there. That's fine. Let's put on a show to the fullest. By the way, remember to remind them that they are not allowed to talk about any news about the Reincarnation Immortal City, even if it's about family members. Let the soldiers return after this is over. Yes, my lord. Hearing this, Gui Yi hurriedly bowed and said, My lord. Yi Chen nodded and then looked at his subordinates and said, There are still 3 days left. You still have 3 days to rest. Rest as much as you can. After 3 days we will officially enter the secret realm. Yes, my lord. Gui Yi, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Zhao Meng, Guan Er, Kai Yin, and the others bowed and said loudly. Chapter 638. When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded and moved his mind. In the next second, the space in front of Yi Chen suddenly distorted. After glancing at the distorted space, Yi Chen took a step into it and disappeared. Luoyang's teleportation portal shone brightly. Countless players were teleporting there. As soon as they appeared, they went straight to the inn where Yi Chen had stayed. In less than 10 minutes, Luoyang, which had just experienced the Golden Turban Rebellion and the invasion of the shifter race, was flooded with millions of players. This time, the players rushed over not to participate in the historical storyline or to fight a boss, but to participate in the auction. That's right, to participate in the auction. Yi Chen's auction. The players knew how difficult it was to obtain high-level cultivation techniques and equipment. If it was in the past, the players would have a headache, but now the players didn't. Although the number of Golden Scarf or goblins killed by the players during the Golden Scarf Rebellion and the Goblins' Invasion storyline wasn't high, they had still killed them. Therefore, the players had points. As long as they had points, and it wasn't a pitiful amount, they could exchange for Enlightenment Stones. As long as they had Enlightenment Stones, they could participate in the auction organized by the Great Han Empire's General of Agile Cavalry, the number 1 human, Yi Chen. Of course, if they didn't have enough points, they could also use spiritual herbs to participate in the auction. Yi Chen would also accept. This was because Yi Chen had already explained on the World Channel that the currency used in the auction was Enlightenment Stones and spiritual herbs. The players could guess that Enlightenment Stones weren't simple and knew the benefits of spiritual herbs. However, the players didn't want to give up on the powerful bait that Yi Chen had released. Enlightenment Stones could only be used for 1 minute. Spiritual herbs would disappear after eating them. However, cultivation techniques and equipment were lifelong. They wouldn't disappear no matter how they were used. Moreover, they could rapidly increase one's strength. Therefore, the players were looking forward to this auction. After all, there was no one who didn't want to quickly become stronger. Especially in 2 days, the protective shield of the safe cities in the real world would completely disappear. At that time, if they didn't have powerful weapons and powerful techniques, how could they survive in the real world? One had to know that in the real world, other than the human race, there was also the demon race. Of course, this was not important. What was important was that there were many demons and they were extremely dangerous. They would eat anyone they saw. If you don't want to be eaten, you have to have the ability to not be eaten. Therefore, Yi Chen's auction attracted the attention of all the players. As long as they participated in Yi Chen's auction, they would be able to obtain weapons and techniques that could fight against the shifter race. It was also because of this that the number of players who came to Luoyang, be it individuals or factions, was terrifying. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, there were already millions of players, and this speed was still increasing crazily. Just as the players were frantically teleporting towards Luoyang, the space in the heaven room of the Luoyang Inn suddenly distorted. Yi Chen, who had left for a while, took a step forward and appeared in the room. At this moment, the noisy discussion in the main hall of the inn instantly reached Yi Chen's ears. Say, why do you think Yi Chen insists on holding an auction? Wouldn't it be better to just state the price? How troublesome would that be? Are you stupid? The auction will definitely make more money. If the price is clearly stated, wouldn't it be as much as he wants? I don't know. Why does Yi Chen insist on using enlightenment stones as currency? Damn it, I only exchanged for 5 enlightenment stones this time. I can't bear to use them. Hee, what's there to guess? I only used 1 enlightenment stone. How should I put it? The feeling is that it clears my mind and clears my thoughts. I can understand many things that I didn't understand before. It also increases my skill proficiency. Other than that, there's nothing else. If that's the case, then Yi Chen specially pointed out the Tao comprehension stones for his soldiers to use. Damn, if that's the case, then Yi Chen's army is even more awesome. That's for sure. Who asked Yi Chen to be so rich? He has so many things. Sigh, it's really infuriating to compare oneself to others. Yi Chen is getting stronger and stronger. There's no one who can stop Yi Chen. No matter how I look at it, Yi Chen is going to unify the world. Isn't it better to unify the world? This way, the human race won't continue to be in chaos. When the time comes, Yi Chen will set the rules. Who will dare to defy him? Those who defy him will be killed. You look like a slave. Don't you know that the imperial system is regressing? Regressing my ass. Why don't you see what the world is like now? F***ck, I dare say that if the human race is not unified, there's no way to fight against the shifter race. When the time comes, everyone will die. This is a sad topic. Some people want to live a stable life. Some people want to be kings. Unfortunately, we're all players. Words carry little weight. Why do you care so much? Whoever wants to be kings can go. I just want to live well. Everything else isn't important. The players spoke one after another. It was very lively. After listening for a while, Yi Chen couldn't help but smile. Sure enough, the players could discover the basic use of the Enlightenment Stone, but they couldn't discover that the Enlightenment Stone was also useful for refining connate numinous treasures and comprehending the laws of heaven and earth. Thinking of this, Yi Chen couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then, he sent a message on the World Channel. The auction has officially begun. Those who want to participate in the auction, just shout out your bid. No matter where you are in Luoyang, you can shout out your bid. If you successfully win the bid, you just need to take out the corresponding Enlightenment Stone or elixir. When the time comes, the auction items will be automatically sent out, and the payment will be automatically collected. In addition, I'll warn everyone. Don't try anything funny and don't steal or rob. Otherwise, you will be demoted to a criminal and imprisoned for 10 years. The moment Yi Chen's words landed, the entire world channel exploded. F***ck. No way you can shout out your bid anywhere in Luoyang? You even have to take out the payment? What's going on? Is there an auction like that? Yeah, it's an auction. Don't you need to be there? Did I F***king hear wrong, or did Yi Chen say something wrong? I thought I heard wrong. So that's not the case. If that's the case, does Yi Chen have a way to conduct the auction from afar? Stop guessing. Why don't you think about what realm boss Yi Chen is at now? He's at the God Martial realm. F***ck. Since boss Yi Chen said it's possible, it's definitely possible. Don't use your mortal mindset to look at boss Yi Chen. Stop wasting time. It's best if they don't understand. Why are you saying so much? If they don't bid, won't we have one less competitor? F***ck, you treacherous scum. You actually have such ideas. Let me tell you, there's no way. As long as you bid, I'll crush you. You won't get a single item. Didn't you see the punishment Yi Chen spoke of? Idiot, that's a warning, not a real punishment. As long as you don't cause trouble, will boss Yi Chen bother with you? The world channel was abuzz with activity, constantly flooding the screen. After Yi Chen glanced at it, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then, with a thought, he said, "The first auction item is 10,000 pieces of yellow-grade equipment. The starting price is 100,000 enlightenment stones." Chapter 639. Yi Chen's voice wasn't loud, but it reached the ears of all the players in Luoyang. In an instant, all the players, especially those who had just teleported to Luoyang, were dumbfounded. They didn't see Yi Chen, but Yi Chen's words were clearly transmitted to their ears. This kind of ability was unimaginable. But soon, the players' attention was drawn to the first item of the auction. In the next second, the individual players and the players from the smaller factions exploded. F***ck. Are you kidding me? 10,000 pieces of yellow-grade equipment? 100,000 enlightenment stones? What the hell? Didn't he say that anyone could participate in the auction? Only those big factions can afford to hold an auction like this. Yeah, F***ck. 100,000 enlightenment stones? I only have 13 enlightenment stones in total. How can I participate in the auction? Does Yi Chen think that we have too few enlightenment stones, and that it's a waste of time? I don't think so, right? Yi Chen clearly said that all players could participate. If he changed his mind, wouldn't he be slapping his own face? F***ck. The concept of participation is huge. Even if you're here, you're still participating. F***ck. My balls are hurting. While the gamers were complaining about Yi Chen's unfairness, Yi Chen, who was in the top room of the inn, couldn't help but frown. Yi Chen's divine sense had already covered the entire Luoyang. Yi Chen naturally heard the players' discussion. And because he heard it, Yi Chen frowned. This was because Yi Chen had already made it clear that the auction he was going to hold was for all players. Anyone was allowed to attend. However, the individual players and the players from small factions were making a ruckus because of the large number of items being auctioned off. How could Yi Chen not frown? F***ck. Why don't they believe my words? Yi Chen had never thought of letting go of the enlightenment stones and elixirs in the hands of individual players or small factions. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't have made it clear on the World Channel that everyone could participate. As for Yi Chen auctioning off 10,000 pieces of yellow-grade equipment, he was specifically targeting large powers. He would first sell off a large amount of his stock before targeting individual players and players from small powers. Who would have thought that some individual players, as well as players from small factions, would be enraged because there were too many items being auctioned at the start? This was not the result that Yi Chen wanted to see. When he thought of this, Yi Chen narrowed his eyes and shouted, "Don't worry. If you want to participate in the auction, stay in Luoyang. If you don't believe me, scram. If you dare to cause trouble or continue making a ruckus, die." The moment Yi Chen's cold and heartless words fell, all the players in Luoyang fell silent. They looked at each other and didn't dare to continue speaking. At this moment, the players only had one thought in their minds. F***ck, that's too domineering. However, the individual players and the small factions who didn't believe Yi Chen dispelled their suspicions and worries because of Yi Chen's domineering words. Although Yi Chen's words were domineering, how could the players not understand the underlying meaning? To be precise, Yi Chen was telling all the players who came to Luoyang that regardless of whether they were an individual or a faction, they would gain something. Only the large factions would participate in the auction at the start. As for the individual players and small factions, they were arranged to be at the end. Yi Chen, who was in the top room of the inn, used his divine sense to detect that the players had quietened down. He said, "Those who want to participate in the auction can make a bid now. No matter where you are, you can make a bid. Every bid must be at least 1,000. Once Yi Chen's words fell, the leaders of the large factions all tried to make a bid. In the next second, all the leaders of the large factions froze on the spot, as the prices of all the bidders were clearly transmitted to their ears. After a brief moment of shock, the leaders of the large factions all started to raise the price without hesitation. A few seconds later, the price of 10,000 pieces of yellow rank equipment was raised to 285,000 enlightenment stones. No one made a bid after that. Yi Chen, who was using his divine sense outside the inn, saw this and directly said, "Sky Dragon City, Zhang Yanwen, bids 285,000 enlightenment stones, going once." After a short pause, Yi Chen spoke again. "Sky Dragon City, Zhang Yanwen, bids 285,000 enlightenment stones, going twice." After another pause, Yi Chen spoke again. "Congratulations, Sky Dragon City, Zhang Yanwen, for bidding for 10,000 pieces of yellow rank equipment for 285,000 enlightenment stones. Please place the 285,000 enlightenment stones in front of you." Once Yi Chen's words fell, Sky Dragon City's Alliance Master Zhang Yanwen hurriedly waved his hand behind him. Not long after, a group of Sky Dragon City players carried boxes to Zhang Yanwen's side and placed them one by one. At this moment, the 29 chests containing the enlightenment stones instantly flew up and quickly flew towards the inn. Then, 10,000 pieces of yellow-grade equipment flew out from the inn and landed in front of Zhang Yanwen. The surrounding players who saw this scene all couldn't help but reveal shocked expressions. In addition, they had expected this to happen. As for Sky Dragon City's Alliance Master Zhang Yanwen, who successfully bid for 10,000 pieces of yellow rank equipment, after a short moment of shock, he hurriedly went up to check the attributes of the yellow rank equipment. When he saw that all the yellow rank equipment were soul equipment, he immediately raised his head to the sky and laughed wildly. He then hurriedly called for his subordinates to collect the equipment on the spot and bind them with blood. The surrounding players who saw this scene all revealed incomparably envious gazes. Because from this moment onwards, the 10,000 subordinates of Sky Dragon City all had a piece of yellow rank equipment that could be summoned in the real world. With this grade of equipment, if they were to face demonic beasts of the devil race, they could easily kill them. It could be said that after obtaining 10,000 pieces of yellow rank equipment, Sky Dragon City's strength had at least doubled compared to before. One had to know that the best equipment that the subordinates of Sky Dragon City wore was only gold rank equipment. But now, all of them were yellow rank equipment. It could be said that they had exchanged shotguns for cannons. It would be hard for them not to become stronger. Yi Chen, who was in the sky room of the inn, after receiving the 285,000 enlightenment stones, the corners of his mouth curled up. Trash that he didn't want, after casually dealing with it, could actually be exchanged for so many enlightenment stones. This transaction was simply too profitable. One couldn't blame Yi Chen for thinking this way. Even though each enlightenment stone could only last for 1 minute, as long as there were enough of them, their usefulness would be great. Even quasi-sages of the great desolate world could be strengthened by the enlightenment stones. One could imagine how useful the enlightenment stones were. Of course, this wasn't the key point. The key point was that enlightenment stones couldn't be dropped in the great desolate world. Moreover, the storyline quest didn't give the option to exchange for them. It could be said that the number of Tao comprehension stones Yi Chen had obtained in the Three Kingdoms beginners area was equivalent to the number of Tao comprehension stones he had obtained. No matter how capable Yi Chen was, it was impossible for him to obtain even one extra Tao comprehension stone. And this was the main reason why Yi Chen was so excited. After all, Yi Chen had only paid the price of trash that was useless to Yi Chen. In exchange, he had obtained enlightenment stones that couldn't be dropped in the great desolate world. Thinking of this, Yi Chen couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then, he opened his mouth and shouted, "Next, let's begin the second auction. 100,000 pieces of yellow rank equipment. The starting price is 1 million enlightenment stones. Each increment must not be less than 1,000. Chapter 640. As soon as Yi Chen finished speaking, the leaders of the various large factions all scrambled to shout out their bids. When the price of the 100,000 pieces of yellow rank equipment reached 1,300,000 enlightenment stones, it stopped. Then, Yi Chen collected the enlightenment stones and took out 100,000 pieces of yellow rank equipment. The second batch of equipment was quickly sold. After that, Yi Chen began the third batch of equipment. Just like before, the leaders of the large factions all participated in the bidding. In the end, Yi Chen collected the enlightenment stones and took out the equipment. Time slowly passed. Yi Chen auctioned off the yellow-grade equipment again and again. In the end, the yellow-grade equipment had contributed 500 million enlightenment stones to Yi Chen. As for the mystic-grade equipment, Yi Chen had earned 2.98 billion Tao comprehension stones. The earth-grade equipment had contributed 38.2 billion enlightenment stones to Yi Chen. When it came to the heaven-grade equipment, Yi Chen thought for a moment and only took out 1,000 pieces. However, these 1,000 pieces of heaven-grade equipment had contributed 1 billion enlightenment stones to Yi Chen. Of course, Yi Chen still had a lot of heaven-grade equipment in his hands, but Yi Chen wasn't going to continue auctioning them. Because heaven-grade equipment was the best equipment in the Three Kingdoms beginner region. If he auctioned off too many, it wouldn't be so easy for Yi Chen when he sent out his troops and swept through the world. And when it came to the cultivation technique auction, just as Yi Chen had expected, the entire player community exploded. The large factions that participated in the competition all shouted out their bids with all their might. Even if it was individual players or players from small factions, they were all envious. In the end, after Yi Chen tossed out most of the king-grade cultivation techniques, monarch-grade cultivation techniques, and emperor-grade cultivation techniques, he obtained a total of 690 billion Tao comprehension stones. And Yi Chen had taken out 1,000 saint-grade cultivation techniques, which had brought him 10 billion enlightenment stones for Yi Chen. The auction for the large factions ended in a short hour. In the top room of the inn, Yi Chen looked at the 700 billion Tao enlightenment stones in his small world, and his mood was carefree. Damn it, this auction was really earning so much money that my hands were cramping. Awesome! Thinking of this, the corners of Yi Chen's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Now we'll start selling equipment and cultivation technique. There were 3 pieces of gold-grade equipment set and 1 enlightenment stone. 1 piece of diamond equipment and 1 piece of enlightenment stone. Yellow-grade equipment cost 10 Tao comprehension stones each. Mystic-grade equipment 100 Tao comprehension stones per piece. Earth-grade equipment 1,000 Tao comprehension stones per piece. King-level cultivation techniques cost 10 Tao comprehension stones. An Emperor-level cultivation technique cost 200 Tao comprehending stones. An Emperor-level cultivation technique cost 3,000 Tao comprehension stones. Those who wish to purchase can directly take out an enlightenment stone or a spirit medicine of equal value, then shout out the item you wish to purchase. As for the exchange rate between spirit medicine and enlightenment stone, it is 10 to 1. As soon as Yi Chun finished speaking, the entire world channel exploded. F***CK. I can finally rest assured. Boss Yi Chun is indeed a man of his word. When Boss Yi Chun started auctioning so many equipment and cultivation techniques, he was actually trying to scam those large factions. What scam? This is called voluntary, alright? Boss Yi Chun didn't force them to come when he held an auction. Don't take it for granted. Boss Yi Chun is giving us benefits. If he really auctioned them off one by one, wouldn't you raise the price? Why don't you think about that? Stop wasting time. We don't even know how much equipment and cultivation techniques Boss Yi Chun still has. Hurry up and make your move. If you're fast, you'll get it. If you're slow, you won't get it. The world channel was flooded with messages for a while, then it quickly stopped. Then, the players in Luoyang hurriedly took out their enlightenment stones or spirit medicine, then shouted out the equipment and cultivation techniques they wanted. After a few breaths, an overwhelming amount of enlightenment stones and spirit medicine flew out from all over Luoyang and rushed towards the inn. When all the enlightenment stones disappeared, the overwhelming amount of equipment and cultivation techniques flew out of the inn and towards all the players in Luoyang who had taken out their enlightenment stones or spirit medicine. Although the players had seen this bizarre scene many times, it still excited them quite a bit. Because the person who created this scene was Yi Chen, and the players could see their future from Yi Chen's magical abilities. To be precise, the players would eventually have Yi Chen's abilities. Of course, the prerequisite was that they could reach Yi Chen's level. However, this didn't stop the players from fantasizing or anticipating. When the players who wanted to buy equipment and cultivation techniques realized that the equipment and cultivation techniques flying in front of them were of the same grade as the equipment and cultivation techniques they had shouted out, they couldn't help but widen their eyes. In fact, many players thought that Yi Chen would make a mistake. After all, there were too many people who wanted to buy. If Yi Chen really made a mistake, or even made a mistake with the equipment and cultivation techniques that many people wanted to buy, it would be a big joke. If the quality of the cultivation techniques and equipment that the players bought was higher, the players would naturally like it and immediately use it without hesitation. If the quality was lower, the players might even receive compensation. Although this was just the players' small thoughts, it really existed in the players' hearts. Of course, the players had their own thoughts, but they were also worried that after Yi Chen made a mistake, he would kill the players who had obtained the high-grade cultivation techniques and equipment, or forcefully take them back. As for the players who had obtained the low-grade cultivation techniques and equipment, Yi Chen might just ignore them. These were the players' thoughts. They were expectant and worried. Unfortunately, the reality was that although Yi Chen controlled tens of millions of cultivation techniques and equipment, there wasn't a single mistake. After the players recovered from their shock, they looked at the players around them vigilantly. Then, they hurriedly dripped their blood on the equipment and used the cultivation techniques on the spot. There was no choice. There were many players who bought the equipment and cultivation techniques, but there were also many players who didn't buy anything. Those people were all jealous. If they used it later, although Yi Chen had said at the beginning of the auction, no one could guarantee that there wouldn't be people who would take the risk and snatch it. The individual players and the players from the small factions were all excited and vigilant as they used the equipment and cultivation techniques that they had bought. As for the leaders of the large factions who had just participated in the auction, they were all in a dilemma. There was no choice. What Yi Chen did later wasn't an auction at all. It was an open sale with a clear price tag. It was a fair trade. And for them, who had spent such a high price, it was a bit of a loss. But no matter how much they were in a dilemma, Yi Chen didn't force them to participate in the auction. He didn't force them to participate in the auction. Even if Yi Chen didn't say it, they knew this. Moreover, it was too late for them to say anything now. The enlightenment stones had been used up. Even if they kept some, they couldn't buy much equipment or cultivation technique. In short, it was useless to say anything now. If they dared to complain on the World Channel or directly went to the inn to find Yi Chen and ask for an explanation, they might even attract Yi Chen's open and above-board revenge. In the end, the leaders of the large factions all had ashen faces as they left Luoyang with their subordinates. In the top room of the inn, Yi Chen looked at the number of enlightenment stones and elixirs contributed by the individual players and the players from the small factions. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He didn't expect that the purchasing power of the individual players and the players from the small factions would be so fierce, more than 500 billion enlightenment stones. F***ck. He really made a big profit this time. He wondered if they would be so angry that they would vomit blood when they discovered the true use of the enlightenment stones. Thinking of this, Yi Chen couldn't help but smirk. Then he said, "Let's sell the remaining stock. Lastly, we'll sell off our stock and change the currency to 2 world stones. 10 2 world stones are equivalent to 1 enlightenment stone. If you're interested, take out your 2 world stones and shout out your desired equipment or technique." Chapter 641. Yi Chen didn't mention that the 2 world stone could be used as a currency until now. Of course, he did it on purpose. As for his goal, other than preventing the players from testing the 2 world stone, he wanted to squeeze as much out of the enlightenment stone as possible. After all, the enlightenment stone was far more useful to Yi Chen than the 2 world stone. If he had to choose between the enlightenment stone and the 2 world stone, Yi Chen would choose the enlightenment stone without hesitation. There was no doubt about that. And now Yi Chen had achieved his goal. Naturally, he would release the 2 world stone, which was far less valuable than the enlightenment stone, and squeeze more out of the players. After all, the 2 world stone was also very useful to Yi Chen. Yi Chen wouldn't let go of the points in the players' hands so easily. The moment Yi Chen said that, the players in Luoyang were all stunned. Then, they were all in an uproar. Damn! What's going on? 2 world stone? Damn, why didn't he mention the 2 world stone at the start? Why did he make me exchange for the enlightenment stone? F***ck. Why do I feel like this is Yi Chen's scheme? He made us exchange for the enlightenment stone in bulk, and now he wants us to exchange for the 2 world stone? It must be a trick. Damn, I feel like the enlightenment stone isn't simple. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't spend so much effort to get us to exchange for the enlightenment stone. So what if it's not simple? We've already exchanged for it and used it all. Yi Chen has who knows how many enlightenment stones he has. What's the use of regretting it? Damn, I'll exchange my remaining points for the 2 world stone and keep it until it appreciates. I won't let Yi Chen take advantage of it. That's right, we have to keep the 2 world stone. We can't let Yi Chen take it for free. I say, can't you see that the 2 world stone doesn't have much effect on Yi Chen? If it was, why would Yi Chen ask for the 2 world stone at the end? In the past, I only thought that Yi Chen was domineering and unreasonable. I didn't expect him to be so sinister. So what if you're sinister? Do you dare to cause trouble for Yi Chen? Don't forget, Yi Chen is now the strongest person in the human race, and his strength can crush everyone. F***ck. 22 world stones can only be exchanged for 1 enlightenment stone. Yi Chen said that 10 2 world stones is equivalent to 1 enlightenment stone. F***ck. This is an open and above-board scheme. Are you going to trade or not? Let's trade. At most, we'll keep 1 or 2 pieces and see what use they have. Damn, Yi Chen's equipment and cultivation methods are all high level. If we miss this opportunity, who knows how long we'll have to wait. The players chatted amongst themselves, and it was a lively scene. However, the players soon quieted down and started to exchange for the 2 world stones. Among them, the players who didn't have enough points to exchange for the Enlightenment Stone were the most excited. Because they didn't even have enough points to exchange for one Enlightenment Stone. But now, as long as they exchanged for the 2 World Stones, they could at least obtain a set of gold equipment. They could even obtain a set of diamond equipment. How could they miss out on such a good opportunity? After all, with good equipment, it would be much easier to kill monsters to level up or kill bosses to obtain good equipment and cultivation method. Of course, the players were so excited because of the description of the 2 World Stone. 2 World Stone allows you to travel between 2 worlds. Do not use it carelessly. The description was simple and crude. The players could roughly guess that it was used to travel between worlds. However, even if the players guessed it, not many of them dared to try using the 2 World Stone. After all, the description of the 2 World Stone was full of warnings. No one would treat it as a joke. Soon, the players in Luoyang City started to shout again. Of course, the content of their shouts was, of course, I want to buy yellow equipment, or I want to buy imperial cultivation methods. After a few breaths, a large number of 2 World Stones flew up from all over Luoyang City and towards the inn. After all the 2 World Stones had arrived at the inn, the densely packed equipment and cultivation methods flew out of the inn and towards the players who had taken out their 2 World Stones. In the sky room of the Luoyang Inn, Yi Chen looked at the mountain of 2 World Stones in the small dimension and couldn't help but smirk. More than 10 billion 2 World Stones. That was enough. Thinking of this, Yi Chen had a thought and said, "The auction is over. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you." As soon as Yi Chen finished speaking, the players in Luoyang City couldn't help but be stunned. The players had never heard Yi Chen say the word, "thank you," before. Now that they heard it, how could they not be stunned? Damn, is this still the demon Yi Chen who kills without batting an eyelid? After a short moment of shock, the players came back to their senses. They looked at each other and shouted in unison, D*MN. At this moment, the players felt that they had suffered a loss. Then it became D*MN, we suffered a huge loss. No matter what the players thought, the outcome was already decided. Yi Chen had obtained a large number of Enlightenment Stones and 2 World Stones from them. No matter how much they regretted or felt conflicted, it was useless. In the sky room of the inn, Yi Chen heard the players in Luoyang City shouting in unison and smiled coldly. Then, he curled his lips in disdain. Yi Chen didn't care what the players thought. Yi Chen only cared about one thing. How could he maximize the benefits of his reincarnated memories? Now, Yi Chen's auction undoubtedly allowed Yi Chen's reincarnated memories to unleash the power of his reincarnated memories. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't have been able to obtain such a large number of Enlightenment Stones and 2 World Stones. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that the players had taken advantage of him. If Yi Chen hadn't pointed out the Enlightenment Stones, the players would have done the same thing as Yi Chen in his previous life. They would have used their points to exchange for rubbish equipment and cultivation technique. One had to know that in Yi Chen's previous life, the players really did this. There was no one who would exchange for Enlightenment Stones. And now, Yi Chen had pointed out the Enlightenment Stone and even used it as a currency. He had even set the price of equipment and cultivation techniques to be far lower than the points needed to be on the exchange leaderboard. Take gold-grade equipment for example. On the merit exchange list and merit exchange list, the exchange price of a gold-grade equipment was equivalent to the exchange price of a Dao Comprehension Stone. However, the price that Yi Chen set was only 1 Enlightenment Stone for a 3-piece gold-ranked equipment set. Although Yi Chen did this on purpose, it couldn't be denied that without Yi Chen, the players wouldn't have been able to obtain so much. But in the end, the players still thought that Yi Chen had cheated them and taken advantage of them. How could Yi Chen be happy about this? Of course, if they really calculated the value, Yi Chen had cheated the players. But the crux of the problem was that without Yi Chen, the players wouldn't have been able to exchange for so many enlightenment stones. Of course, whether he cheated them or not, Yi Chen wouldn't feel any burden in his heart. Simply put, so what if he cheated them? He would kill them. That was what Yi Chen was thinking, and Yi Chen would do the same. As long as someone dared to cause trouble for Yi Chen because of this, Yi Chen would only choose one method, and that was to kill that person. Chapter 642. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's eyes narrowed, a cold glint flashing through his eyes. At this time, the innkeeper suddenly came to the door, and then carefully bowed and said, "You of Beach, a eunuch from the palace has arrived and wishes to see you of Beach." Had the wedding date been set, or thinking of this, Yi Chen nodded and said, "Let him in. Let him in." "Yes, Lord Yu of Beach." Hearing this, the innkeeper hastily bowed. Finished speaking, he hastily turned around to pass on the message for Yi Chen. Yi Chen glanced at the empty doorway and suddenly frowned. No, there was killing intent. At this moment, Yi Chen was already an expert of the divine martial realm. His senses were extremely sharp. Although the killing intent that had suddenly appeared was extremely faint and had immediately disappeared, Yi Chen had still sensed it. In the next second, Yi Chen's consciousness locked onto the source of the killing intent. Narrowing his eyes, a cold glint flashed through his eyes. A eunuch from the palace. The strands of killing intent that had suddenly leaked out from the inn had originated from the eunuchs from the palace that the innkeeper had spoken of. If it were anyone else, upon discovering that the killing intent originated from a eunuch, they would most likely attribute it to Zhang Li and the other eunuchs. However, Yi Chen would not. Putting aside the fact that Yi Chen was currently one of the eunuchs, the fact that Yi Chen was about to marry Lu Hong's adopted daughter, Princess Zhaoyang Daqiao, and Princess Chang'e Shaoqiao, made it impossible for the eunuchs to act against Yi Chen. But now, a eunuch had suddenly appeared in the inn. Moreover, this eunuch was extremely skilled at concealing his killing intent. At the same time, he was also a native eunuch. What did this mean? Someone had used a chess piece planted in the palace to act against Yi Chen. This was to sow discord, and to use a native eunuch. Interesting. Thinking of this, Yi Chen smiled coldly. Yi Chen didn't know who had sent the eunuch, but Yi Chen knew one thing for certain. The person who had sent this eunuch was definitely a player. Moreover, it was the leader of a large power. As for the purpose, it was to kill Yi Chen. Even if it didn't succeed, it would make Yi Chen misunderstand the eunuchs of Yi Chen's faction. Then, Yi Chen would make a move on the eunuchs and take revenge on them. In this way, the eunuchs would definitely treat Yi Chen as an enemy and devise a series of plots and machinations to kill Yi Chen. Even if Yi Chen could not be killed by the eunuchs, Yi Chen would have to face some restrictions, such as being stripped of his official position, his title, and so on. Then, Yi Chen's path to ruling the world would be blocked. Without an official position or a title, he wouldn't have a proper name. Just as Yi Chen thought of this, the young eunuch from the palace timidly arrived at the door. Then, he bowed solemnly to Yi Chen and said, "This servant pays respects to you, Lord Beach." "What is it?" Yi Chen looked at the eunuch and asked. When the young eunuch heard this, he immediately smiled flatteringly and said, "Reporting to you, Lord Beach, His Majesty misses you, Lord Beach, very much. Thus, he specially sent this servant to pass on a message for you, Lord Beach, to enter the palace to meet His Majesty." Enter the palace to meet His Majesty. Damn, this is even more awesome. If I didn't see through this bastard's background, wouldn't I be accused of trespassing on the palace? I wonder which bastard wants to deal with me. Thinking of this, Yi Chen raised his right hand and made a grabbing motion. In the next second, the young eunuch flew toward Yi Chen. Then, Yi Chen grabbed him by the neck. Looking at the indescribably frightened young eunuch, Yi Chen smiled coldly and asked, "Tell me, who sent you?" As soon as Yi Chen finished speaking, the young eunuch's face immediately changed, and he fiercely clenched his teeth. With a crack, the young eunuch's face quickly turned green and his body quickly grew larger. When Yi Chen saw this, his eyes suddenly widened and he roared, "How dare you!" After saying this, Yi Chen swung his right hand and the rapidly growing young eunuch was instantly thrown out of the window by Yi Chen. Then, the young eunuch flew into the sky outside the tavern. In the blink of an eye, the young eunuch's corpse exploded with a bang and green blood splattered everywhere. When Yi Chen saw this, he pointed his right hand at the air. Boom! A loud sound was heard. A sea of fire suddenly appeared above the tavern and instantly burned the splattered green blood. Damn, these bastards, do they really think I have a good temper and won't start a massacre again? Thinking of this, Yi Chen's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light. Then, he released his divine sense and instantly covered all of Luoyang. After a few breaths, Yi Chen narrowed his eyes and took a step forward, instantly disappearing from the sky room. At that moment, Yi Chen's auction had ended, but there were still tens of millions of players in Luoyang City. Although there were fewer players near the tavern Yi Chen was in at the beginning, there were still many of them. Yi Chen's angry roar, the young eunuch's sudden explosion, and the sea of fire roasting the green blood were all seen by the players around the tavern. At that moment, the players looked at each other and there was an uproar. Damn! What's going on? I think I saw a young eunuch being thrown out of Yi Chen's room and exploding? You didn't see wrong, but that's not the point. After the young eunuch exploded, green blood splattered everywhere. That's poisonous blood. Doesn't this mean that someone wants to deal with Yi Chen? Could it be that Zhang Li and the other senior eunuchs want to deal with Yi Chen? It must be. Don't forget that the one who exploded was a young eunuch. If it wasn't incited by Zhang Li and the other senior eunuchs, why would the young eunuch come to deal with Yi Chen for no reason? He even used such a sinister method to deal with Yi Chen. This is going to be a good show. I wonder if Yi Chen will kill Zhang Li and the other senior eunuch. I think so. Don't forget how ferocious Yi Chen was back then. He killed so many people at the drop of a hat. I don't think so. Don't forget that those eunuchs are quite capable. They can't be killed just like that. If they were killed casually, it would be strange if Lu Hong didn't get angry. Just as the players were discussing amongst themselves, in Luoyang City, in a commoner's house, the space suddenly distorted. In the next second, Yi Chen took a step forward and appeared there. The moment Yi Chen appeared, 3 exclamations were heard. Yi Chen! In the next second, the 3 of them shouted at the same time. Quickly log off. Upon hearing this, Yi Chen squinted his eyes and pointed at the air with his right hand. In the next second, the bodies of the 3 players, which had just begun to blur, instantly solidified and were fixed in place. When Yi Chen saw this, he sneered. With a wave of his right hand, the thick black godslayer instantly appeared in his hand. When the 3 players saw this, their pupils constricted. Clearly, the 3 players were very afraid of Yi Chen's godslayer. Otherwise, they wouldn't have acted like this. In the next second, the chubby middle-aged player among the 3 forced a few laughs and said, "Don't worry. Yi Chen, we didn't offend you." Why, his words came to an abrupt end after a poochie sound. At the same time, the godslayer flashed and devoured the player's soul. Yi Chen didn't say anything. His act of stabbing a player to death frightened the other 2 players. In the next second, the 2 of them shouted at the same time. "Lord Yu of Beach, this has nothing to do with us. Our boss insisted on doing this." Chapter 643. When Yi Chen heard this, he narrowed his eyes and asked, "Who is your boss?" "Second Prince, Lu Xie." When the 2 players heard Yi Chen's question, they hurriedly shouted. When Yi Chen heard this, he was stunned and his eyes widened. Lu Xie? How is that possible? Lu Xie was a native of the game world. He was one of the 2 sons of the great Han Empire's emperor, Lu Hong. Although he didn't leave much of a mark in history, he did have a brilliant history. From Yi Chen's point of view, Lu Xie was a tragedy. In the end, he would be killed. But now, the two players that were controlled by Yi Chen actually told Yi Chen that Lu Xie was their boss. How could Yi Chen not be shocked? Are these two bastards saying this on purpose to mislead me, or is this really the case? If what they said was the truth, could it be that players could replace the natives of the game world? But if Lu Xie was really replaced by players, why did they only attack me now in Yi Chen's previous life? There had never been a case of players replacing the natives of the game world. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't have been so shocked when he heard Lu Xie's identity. After all, it wasn't a small matter for players to replace the natives of the game world. Not to mention, the player was replacing the son of the great Han Empire's emperor, Lu Hong, Lu Xie's position. If it really happened, no matter how hard the players tried to hide, they would eventually be exposed. However, in Yi Chen's previous life, there was no such rumor. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's face darkened. In the next second, Yi Chen pointed the Godslayer in his right hand at the two players and asked, "Are you sure Lu Xie is the boss you speak of?" "Yes, Sir Yu of Beach. I can swear that Lu Xie really is our boss. He used a special treasure, the 9 turns in balcony, and after 9 reincarnations, he replaced Lu Xie." The two players who had been rooted to the spot by Yi Chen shivered when they saw the black and thick god-slaying spear in front of them. Then, they hurriedly nodded in response. 9 turns in balcony, damn, I haven't heard of this thing in my previous life. Why is it here? Thinking of this, Yi Chen's brows furrowed. Yi Chen thought of his reincarnation. More accurately, after Yi Chen reincarnated, the player's experiences in this life were more or less affected. So it wasn't strange that there were some special changes. Damn, if players can replace the natives of the game world's natives, and even replace the natives of the game world's game world, and even Yi Chen's men. No, it's impossible for players to replace the natives of the game world without paying a price. Moreover, the top-notch historical officials and top-notch historical generals had very strong souls. They weren't easy to replace, unlike Lu Xie. He was just a kid, a weakling. Even if he had a noble status, his soul was only at the level of a child's. Thinking up to this point, Yi Chen narrowed his eyes and looked at the two players who were rooted to the ground. He asked, "Did your boss just replace Lu Xie?" "Yes, Sir Yu of Beach." The two players hurriedly nodded when they heard Yi Chen's question. Hearing this, Yi Chen waved his right hand and a light barrier suddenly enveloped one of the two players. In the next second, Yi Chen looked at the player who wasn't enveloped by the light barrier and asked, "What's your boss name in the real world? Don't lie. Otherwise, you won't even have the chance to reincarnate as a human." The player who wasn't enveloped by the light barrier was stunned when he saw his companion being enveloped by the light barrier. When he heard Yi Chen's blatant threat, his expression changed drastically. When Yi Chen saw this, he smiled coldly and shouted, "Speak!" Yi Chen deliberately released a light barrier that blocked out sound and sight. The purpose was to prevent the two players from colluding and randomly saying a person's name to mislead Yi Chen. In fact, when the two players said that their boss had replaced Lu Xie, Yi Chen didn't completely believe them. Of course, Yi Chen wasn't bothered by this. If they didn't understand, it didn't matter. He could directly interrogate them. When the player who wasn't enveloped by the light barrier heard this, he suddenly trembled. He looked at Yi Chen's Godslayer in horror and said in a trembling voice, Li Mubai. Lord Yu of Beach, our boss is called Li Mubai. Just yesterday, he replaced Lu Xie. Although the player who wasn't enveloped by the light barrier didn't know why Yi Chen suddenly created the light barrier, he knew that Yi Chen wouldn't create a light barrier for no reason. If he lied, Yi Chen might see through it. When the player who wasn't enveloped by the light barrier thought of Yi Chen's past deeds, he felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't want to die, nor did he want his soul to be destroyed. He didn't want to completely disappear from this world. Therefore, he didn't dare to hide it and said it. Yi Chen's divine sense had been locked onto this player. When he heard this, his face sank. This player wasn't lying. If he was lying, Yi Chen's divine sense would easily detect it. However, this was the crux of the problem. This player wasn't lying. This meant that someone really did replace Lucia. Moreover, the person who replaced Lucia was one of the most famous human experts in Yi Chen's previous life, Li Mubai. In his previous life, Li Mubai, who had obtained the title of the Wine Sword Immortal, actually went to great lengths to replace Lucia. This was really interesting. In Yi Chen's previous life, Li Mubai was an expert among individual players. He made a name for himself. It was rumored that Li Mubai obtained the inheritance of the Wine Sword Immortal. He came and went without a trace. His imperial sword technique was superb. Many people had seen Li Mubai, one man, one sword, roaming the world. Sometimes he would slay demons, sometimes he would stand up for injustice, and sometimes he would sing loudly in his drunken state. He was very carefree. It was also because of this rumor that Yi Chen didn't have any ill feelings towards Li Mubai. In fact, Yi Chen even felt that Li Mubai was a person with a story. Or perhaps, he was a wanton and unrestrained sword immortal who played around in the world. However, now Yi Chen heard that the famous wine sword immortal, Li Mubai, actually went to great lengths to replace Lucia. This was far from the Li Mubai in Yi Chen's memory. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that Li Mubai had made a move against Yi Chen. Moreover, his first move was a vicious one. An extremely vicious one. Whether it was because of helplessness or because of ambition, it didn't matter what the reason was. Since he made a move against me, then he should be prepared to die. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's eyes narrowed. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 644. A cold glint flashed in Yi Chen's eyes. Although it was very fast, it was caught by the players who weren't enveloped by the light barrier. In an instant, the players who weren't enveloped by the light barrier turned pale and shouted in shock, "Please, Lord Yi Chen, I beg you. Your Excellency Ghost King, please spare me. This really has nothing to do with me. I was only forced by Li Mubai. If I didn't listen to his orders and waited here for news from that little eunuch, he would kill me in the real world. I had no choice, Your Excellency. Shut up." Hearing this, Yi Chen coldly harumphed and shouted. After hearing Yi Chen's extremely cold rebuke, the players who weren't enveloped by the light barrier couldn't help but shiver. Then, they saw a large wet patch on their pant. F***ck, I actually peed. When Yi Chen saw this, he couldn't help but frown. Then, he waved his right hand and a light barrier instantly enveloped the player. In the next second, Yi Chen patted the air and the light barrier around the first player, who was enveloped by the light barrier shattered, revealing the player inside. "Lord Yu of Beach, I'll speak. The moment the player who appeared from the light barrier saw Yi Chen, he immediately shouted in a shrill voice. When Yi Chen heard this, he curled his lips in disdain and said, "Speak. Remember, you only have one chance." When the player heard this, he hurriedly nodded and shouted with a trembling voice, "Li Mubai. My boss is Li Mubai. He used poison to control everyone in our guild. Even our original boss was controlled by Li Mubai. Later, he found the 9 transformations in balcony in our guild's warehouse and obtained 9 chances to rebuild his account. Just yesterday, he successfully became Lucia. Then, he ordered us to wait here for a little eunuch's message. If we couldn't wait, he told us to quickly return and tell him. If we waited, he told us to immediately leave Luoyang and gather everyone in the guild to head to Yuzhou and wait for his orders. The player paused for only a blink of an eye before he shouted again, "That's right. Lord Yu of Beach, our original boss, and we all tried to dissuade Li Mubai. However, this slut only wanted to plot against you, Lord Yu of Beach. Lord Yu of Beach, please understand." Yi Chen, whose divine sense had been locked onto this player, narrowed his eyes when he heard this. So that's how it was. This B**** has really made a great move. On one hand, he wants to deal with me. On the other hand, He wants to take over my Yuzhou province. If he fails, he could still be protected by the identity of the second prince. It was a good plan, but it was a pity that he thought too much. Do you really think that I will have scruples just because Xiu is the second prince? Thinking of this, Yi Chen smiled coldly and clapped his left hand. Bang! Bang! Two sounds of bodies exploding instantly rang out. The bodies of the two players controlled by Yi Chen instantly exploded into chunks of flesh that splattered all over the ground. Yi Chen glanced at the chunks of flesh on the ground before looking in the direction of the Luoyang Imperial Palace. He coldly snorted and moved his mind. In the next second, the space in front of Yi Chen suddenly distorted. Yi Chen glanced at the distorted space. Then, he stepped into the distorted space and disappeared. In the main hall of the Imperial Palace, a young eunuch hastily arrived at the main hall. As soon as he entered, he bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Your Majesty. The second prince, Lu Xie, requests an audience with Your Majesty." "Xie? What is he doing here?" Lu Hong, who was furiously writing on the table in front of him, couldn't help but be surprised when he heard this. When the little eunuch heard this, he hastily bowed and said, "The second prince told this servant that he wishes to present a treasure to Your Majesty." Lu Hong, who had just finished writing, was surprised when he heard this. He then put down the imperial brush in his hand and looked at the young eunuch. "Xie came to present a treasure? Your Majesty, the second prince told this servant as such. Furthermore, he said it very solemnly. Thus, this servant didn't dare to delay and hurriedly came to report to Your Majesty." The young eunuch hastily bowed. When Lu Hong heard this, he looked at head eunuch Zhang Li in astonishment. He then asked, "Father Reng, do you know what treasure Xie obtained?" "Your Majesty, this servant believes that since the second prince said it was a treasure, it must be a unique treasure. Why don't you take a look?" When Zhang Li heard Lu Hong's question, he immediately smiled and bowed. When Zhang Li spoke, he had a smile on his face. However, Lu Hong didn't see the cold glint in Zhang Li's eyes after he bowed. Of course, Lu Hong also didn't hear the hidden meaning in Zhang Li's words. What unique treasure? That was just to increase Lu Hong's expectations. When Lu Hong saw that Lu Xie's treasure was only SOSO, he would definitely be disappointed. This was Zhang Li's goal. To Zhang Li, Lu Bian was the master he wanted to support. Lu Xie was an enemy who wanted to fight for the throne. Naturally, Zhang Li didn't like him. Of course, this was one of the reasons why Zhang Li wanted to scheme against Lu Xie. Another important reason was that Zhang Li had just received a piece of information from a spy. This seemingly young second prince of the Great Han Empire had actually managed to bribe a young eunuch in a short 2 hours. Then, he sent the young eunuch out of the palace to carry out some unknown mission. Although Zhang Li had already sent people to investigate the young eunuch, Zhang Li still hadn't received any accurate information. Zhang Li didn't like the feeling of being unable to control things. Therefore, Zhang Li naturally hated the second prince of the Great Han Empire even more. When Lu Hong heard Zhang Li's words, his eyes couldn't help but light up. He then looked at the young eunuch in the hall and nodded. "Let him in." "Yes, Your Majesty." When the young eunuch heard this, he hurriedly bowed in response. Then, he turned around and left the hall to call second prince Lu Xie. Lu Hong glanced at the young eunuch who had left. Then, he looked at the table in front of him. Because of the delay, the writing had stopped. He couldn't help but frown. In the next second, Lu Hong looked at Zhang Li and asked, "Father Reng, can't the wedding date be brought forward again?" "Reporting to Your Majesty, this servant also hopes that the wedding date can be brought forward. This way, the great general of agile cavalry can be closer to Your Majesty as soon as possible. However, the imperial astronomer has calculated that it will take at least 5 days. If it is brought forward again, it won't be an auspicious date. It will have a great impact on Your Majesty." When Zhongli heard this, he hurriedly bowed. When Lu Hong heard this, he let out a long sigh and said, "Then, if that's the case, then it will be 5 days. If that's the case, then let's wait another 5 days. At that time, my 2 daughters will be married to my good son-in-law. Then I can sit back and relax." When Zhongli heard this, he immediately smiled flatteringly and bowed. "Not only that, Your Majesty, you don't know this, but this servant specially looked for the imperial astronomer to calculate. After 5 days, the great Han Empire will be in Your Majesty's hands. At that time, the great Han Empire will be like the sun in the sky, overshadowing all the previous emperors. And Your Majesty, you will become the only emperor throughout the ages, illuminating all the ages." When Zhongli heard this, he immediately smiled flatteringly and bowed. When Lu Hong heard this, his eyes suddenly widened. Then, he shouted with incomparable ecstasy, "Is it really so? Your Majesty, this servant wouldn't dare to deceive Your Majesty." When Zhongli heard this, he hurriedly knelt and loudly bowed. When Lu Hong heard this, he laughed and then shouted, "Good." Chapter 645. It was obvious that Zhang Li's flattery had touched Lu Hong's soft spot. Otherwise, Lu Hong would not be so excited. That was indeed the case. Although Lu Hong was muddle-headed, fond of grandiose achievements, and extremely greedy for wealth, to Lu Hong, there was nothing that could make him happier than becoming an eternal emperor. However, what Lu Hong did not know was that Father Jin, whom he loved the most, was actually just flattering him. Lu Hong's excited laughter did not even last for 3 seconds before an 8-year-old boy walked into the hall. The boy was the great Han Empire's second prince, Lu Xie, or rather, the human player who replaced Lu Xie, Li Mubai. Seeing Lu Xie enter, Lu Hong immediately stopped laughing and asked, "Sire, what treasure do you want to present to father?" After hearing Lu Hong's question, the second prince of the great Han Empire, Lu Xie's eyes flashed with a relaxed gaze. He then bowed to Lu Hong and said, "Father, I heard that father's energy has been lacking recently, so I specially searched through ancient books and finally found a piece of information. The 1,000-year blood ginseng can prolong one's life and greatly replenish one's vitality. Thus, I specially sent people out to search for the 1,000-year blood ginseng. Perhaps it was my filial piety that moved the heavens. This legendary 1,000-year blood ginseng was finally found by me. Thus, I specially brought it here to present to father." "Sire, are you serious?" Lu Hong was slightly stunned when he heard this. His eyes suddenly widened and he asked. Lu Hong indeed felt that his body was not as good as before. The 1,000-year blood ginseng that Lu Xie mentioned just happened to touch the itch in his heart. Otherwise, Lu Hong would not have become so excited all of a sudden. When Lu Xie heard this, he nodded seriously, then bowed and said, "I'm sorry. Father, Xie would not dare to deceive father. Xie is willing to use my head to guarantee that this is absolutely true." "Good. Good. Quickly present it." When Lu Hong heard this, he could not help but laugh wildly and then shouted. When Lu Xie heard this, the corners of his mouth curled up. He then bowed and said, "Yes, father." After Lu Xie finished speaking, he took out an exquisite wooden box from his bosom and held it high above his head with both hands. When Zhongli, who was beside Lu Hong, saw this, a cold light flashed across his eyes. Then, he walked towards Lu Xie with a smile on his face. Arriving in front of Lu Xie, Zhongli took the wooden box and opened it, preparing to inspect it. After all, the item had to be handed over to Lu Hong. No matter who it was, as Lu Hong's trusted eunuch, Zhongli had to confirm that it was not poisonous and harmless before handing it over to Lu Hong. Unexpectedly, as soon as Zhongli opened the wooden box, a violent explosion could be heard. Pung! A large cloud of pink mist suddenly burst out of the wooden box. Zhongli, who found that something was wrong, suddenly changed his face. He threw away the wooden box in his hand, covered his mouth and nose, and shouted sternly, "Protect him!" Lu Hong, who was sitting on the dragon throne, also came back to his senses at this moment. "Lu Xie, are you trying to kill your father?" "Your Majesty, run! This mist is poisonous." Zhongli, who was just about to kick Lu Xie, suddenly felt his leg go limp. Then, he sat down on the ground with a plop. Hearing Zhang Li's warning, Lu Hong's face changed greatly. Without thinking, he stood up and prepared to leave through the back door of the palace. However, as soon as Lu Hong stood up, he sat down on the chair with a pung. At this moment, the space within the palace suddenly twisted. However, it immediately disappeared without a trace. All of these changes were not noticed by Lu Hong, Zhang Li, or the player who replaced second Prince Lu Xie. Seeing Zhang Li and Lu Hong both paralyzed on the ground due to the poison, the Great Han Empire's second prince Lu Xie suddenly smiled strangely. Then, he looked at Lu Hong and said, "Father, don't think about anyone coming to save you. This palace, inside and outside, has been replaced with my people. Oh right, it's the Inhumans that father thinks of. Unfilial son. Unfilial son." Hearing this, Lu Hong's face paled and he yelled at Lu Xie. At this moment, no matter how stupid Lu Hong was, he knew what Lu Xie wanted to do. Apart from killing the king and usurping the throne, there was nothing else. At the thought of his impending death, Lu Hong felt unwell all over. Fear, terror, panic, anger, disbelief, unwillingness, etc. All kinds of emotions rushed into Lu Hong's heart. "Second prince, even if you succeed in killing the king and usurping the throne, the civil and military officials of the Great Han Empire will not recognize you. Listen to me, turn back and be saved." Zhang Li looked at Lu Xie, an 8-year-old child, with a face full of disbelief. Then, he tried his best to calm his rapidly beating heart before speaking sincerely. Hearing this, Lu Xie coldly smiled. Then, he raised his right hand and slapped Zhang Li without hesitation. After a pause sound, a small red handprint appeared on Zhang Li's deathly pale face. After being slapped by Lu Xie, Zhang Li fell to the ground with a pung sound. "Damn eunuch, if you want glory, splendor, and wealth, you better help me persuade my father, that old bastard, to pass the throne to me. Otherwise, you will know what it means to live a life worse than death." Lu Xie looked at Zhang Li and said coldly. After saying this, he strode towards Lu Hong, who was sitting on the dragon throne. Seeing Lu Xie striding towards him, Lu Hong suddenly felt as if his most precious thing was about to be snatched away. This feeling instantly stimulated Lu Hong's nerves. In the next second, Lu Hong yelled at Lu Xie, "Lu Xie, unfilial son, don't think that I will pass the throne to you. If you want to bear the name of killing the king and usurping the throne, then do it." In reality, in Lu Hong's heart, he had a feeling that no matter how vicious Lu Xie was, he would not dare to kill him. And this was the fundamental reason why Lu Hong dared to yell so loudly. Who would have thought that as soon as Lu Hong finished speaking, Lu Xie would directly wave his right hand and a sharp dagger that flickered with cold light instantly appeared in his hand. Looking at the dagger in his hand, Lu Xie raised his eyebrows and raised the dagger in his hand somewhat, flaunting. He then said, "Father, do you know what grade this dagger is?" "You don't know, right? I can tell you. Heaven grade. Are you very surprised? Why did I say this?" Just as Lu Hong was dumbfounded and did not know what was wrong with Lu Xie chuckled and said, "For this dagger, I spent quite a few Dao comprehension stones. But it's also thanks to this dagger that I can try it out. Cutting someone into 1,000 pieces tsk, just thinking about it makes me feel good." As soon as Lu Xie finished speaking, he arrived in front of Lu Hong. When Lu Hong heard Lu Xie's words, he immediately could not remain calm. In the next second, Lu Hong glared angrily at Lu Xie and yelled, "Lu Xie! Bastard! You bastard! You actually want to cut us into 1,000 pieces?" You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.